Welcome everyone to a brand new episode of the Jams Tea podcast where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And today we're coming at you with a brand new episode. We are going to be covering two new records on our main episode today. We are going to be covering Foxing's new album, Draw Down the Moon. And we are going to be covering the new album, Lingua Ignota's Sinner. Get ready. So we got a stacked main episode today. Today we're also doing a record club. We're doing Chvrches' recommended album this week, which is the incomparable Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here. So look forward to that episode. And furthermore, we of course have the monolithic ending to our Radiohead retrospective. We are going to be talking about a moon-shaped pool this week. So be on the lookout for that too.
Absolutely.
Gosh golly, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about.
This is the 19 character album title core week. 3 out of the 4 records have 19 characters in their titles. It's a big week.
Wow.
I can't even fathom having the kind of brain where that is something I would actually notice. I'm honestly just in awe of some of you sometimes.
Wow. Are you including spaces?
Yes, I said character. So
yeah, okay.
Well, very good. Yeah, there you go. That's the extra mile that we go on this podcast, that August goes at least.
Analyze down to the last detail.
Yeah. Also, just to shout out as well, nothing in particular, but I want to shout out our viewers and commenters. We've been getting a lot of more comments recently. Obviously, we've talked about that week to week, but the videos we've put out in the last week have been pretty consistently popular, which has been really nice. Our Billie Eilish and Bleachers episode got like a lot of comments, from outright praise to even some criticism, which we love to get genuinely.
King of Limbs video sparked some debate on Reddit.
The King of Limbs video is currently, I think the Reddit thread for that is like at 27 comments.
Jesus Christ.
and 7 upvotes, which is hilarious. But like the comments are about the album. They're not like shitting on us or anything, which is nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, also if you're not already following us on Reddit, it's the same handle as our Twitter and Instagram, Jams Tea Pod. And yeah, we also put out a record club on Mr. Bungle's California as well, which is doing really nicely too. So to all the people who've left comments, to all the people who've interacted, thank you. Please keep doing it if you want to. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear from you, especially on the records we're going to be talking about today, because they're pretty thorny and we could see some divisive reactions on a lot of them pretty easily.
Also, I guess this is a little bit late, but my new book is still out. There's a sale going on with it this week. There's also a sale that's going to be going on next week. Every subsequent week, there's going to be a free volume that I'm getting. Oh, look, there she even has it. Ooh, damn. I haven't even got mine yet. But every subsequent week, I'm allowing it to happen. Amazon is letting me give away one of them on Kindle. So based on whenever you see this, there's going to be something that's either on sale or free. So go check that out. It'll be in the description.
I have been.
Tyler's got it on. It's so snazzy. I love looking at it.
Yeah.
I'm about 30% of the way through it.
Oh Jesus!
Also, surprise, motherfucker.
Did not know that. Morgan just showed up to be like, bam, I'm on this episode and I'm reading your book, bitch.
Yeah. So
fucking MVP as usual.
Busy.
Real gay shit.
Oh,
What?
I mean, damn.
I said I have been packing, and then Tyler said real gay shit. So it's trash.
Fellas, is it gay to store clothes?
I mean, reading your homie's book is real gay shit.
I know what you meant.
In the best way possible.
I know what you meant, but I wanted to pervert it.
Yeah, good.
That's what we do here.
Anyway, it's time now to. So yes, please check out Jake's books if you haven't already. They're a wild ride, a very emotional roller coaster.
Tyler was messaging me the other night when I was on night shift, and there was a journey he went through.
Yeah.
Oh,
Anyway,
how far are you?
Volume 3 of Baron's Hollow.
Oh no! Oh no!
I'm glad that I have achieved my goal of actually making something that's notoriously difficult.
I had to take a break for about a month reading that book because
there were moments where it was like I was messaging Jake like, Jake, this is incredibly powerful, and then the next moment I'd be like, Jake, what the fuck are you doing? Like, it's too much.
What is the matter with you?
My answer is a lot.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
so if you wanna get on board with whatever that is, then and you want to know what we're talking about, then you better go and check those out.
And Children of the Grave is even better.
I can't wait. Okay.
But
So
now,
what we've been listening to over the past 7 days, Jake, what have you been listening to?
well, first off, I would like to shout out a project of Jams and Tea podcast veteran Connor. Released one of his projects recently under the name of Calendars, Commas, and that album is called Ellipsis, and it's very good. We need to include that Bandcamp link in the description as well. It's like listed. I hadn't heard any of his music before, so I kind of went in just with like knowing that it was like ambient electronic stuff. So when I turned it on, naturally, I was instantly bulldozed by the fact that it is an incredibly big, thick, heavy, drony experience. I mean, the first track is called like Domino Skyscraper, which is basically the best possible title you could have for something like this. And yeah, I mean, the whole record is just very good. I was quite taken with that project. It's like the complete opposite end of the spectrum of August Ambient Project, which is a very like intricate, very detail-oriented thing, and then Connor's is just like this insanely fucking huge thing that just demolished me, and I was very, very pleased with it. So please go check that out if you're looking for that kind of shit. If you think it tickles your fancy.
Yeah, also worth mentioning as well is that he actually put out a brand new EP last week too, called There, which is I put a link to that
so good.
in last week's episode, but I'll put a link to both projects in this video as well. I haven't heard the album, but the EP I can definitely speak for. I really enjoyed that, and I look forward to listening to the album as well.
Well, yeah, go check it out. Go check out all the people we know who make music. Go check out Saoirse. Go check out August. Go check out Morgan. Do it. Fucking stupid loser. Anyway, I also listened to I I haven't actually listened to a whole lot of things, mainly because I started a new job last week, but I'm working third shift at a place now, and it's enormous, and it's like a vaguely industrial place. So I was just like, I think it's time we christen this experience with a little bit of death consciousness. So I turned that on, and let me tell you, when you're inside a building that is the size of about 2 football stadiums, and it's completely dark and no one else is there, and you're just listening to Blood Hail, you feel a little like, oh wow, this is like, this is kind of otherworldly. And then it's just like, you ever just get so high you get scared? And then then I just left, and I just had to sit in the cafeteria for a while because I was like, Dan Barrett scares me. There's a unique feeling that you get when you listen to music of that kind in such a like a monochromatic environment, I guess, that's just like so alien and beyond that which you've experienced it before. It really just goes to show how different the environment in which you listen to something can affect your listening experience so drastically. But other than that, I've been listening to, let's see here. Oh yeah, I also did listen to, I guess I'm just throwing this around with reckless abandon, I did listen to Glacier Flower 21 twice, just because it was also perfect mood music for wandering around on in complete darkness, which again, if you haven't listened to that, what are you fucking doing? It's one of the best albums of the year. Morgan and I will fight you. We talked about how Morgan will fly to places to beat you up. Well, I'll go there with him. We'll all go there.
Yeah.
All of us. We are going to beat you to death.
Yes.
I'll buy a ticket and you'll hide in the wheel well.
Yeah.
We'll
that's
smuggle you.
As long as you're
further
COVID,
crimes.
as long as you're COVID safe, guys, then it's all
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Um
Or a mask under the wheel well.
I also listened to, I listened to the first album proper by Chvrches, because I'm getting ready for the new one to come out. And it's just kind of been a while. Like I'd heard, I paid attention when, what was that most recent album
Love
called?
is Dead.
Love is Dead, when that came out. And that album was, I liked that more than most people, but it's generally speaking, like I just kind of remember a couple of the singles, and that's kind of it.
Thoroughly fine.
Yeah, that's about what I think of it. But I hadn't really listened to the first album in full until now, and it's a really good album, actually. I was pleasantly surprised with how much I actually liked it. That said, I don't like any of the songs that they've made thus far as much as the 3 singles they've released for the new album, which I think are just, all 3 of them are just fucking amazing. All 3 of them. Love them to death. I can't wait for that record to come out. And yeah, I've been kind of light this week on listening, because I've been listening to a certain album a whole lot.
I'll start out with a 70s prog album by a group called Happy the Man. I know.
We don't listen to that here.
Stunning. And the album is self-titled, also called Happy the Man.
Is that like a comma? Happy, comma, the man?
Happy the Man, all one word. All spaces.
Is it not like, is he the father of Portugal the Man?
What did I just say, Tyler?
Did you say that? Oh, sorry.
Yes. You sniping bastard.
No, I had it in my head ever since August 1st said Happy the Man, and I was like, wait, focused for my moment, and I didn't even hear what you said.
That's amazing. Anyway, this is a jazz rock kind of progressive tinged album. I thought it just landed as a little generic and kind of the scene. The opening track I think is really great on that album. Listen to that and don't listen to the rest of it, because a lot of the rest of it sounds, I don't really know how to say this, but the jazz elements almost sound like they're ripped from a shitty porno. And it's a pretty bad experience evocatively, but it wasn't the worst thing ever. Next thing.
It's just always how I imagined Steely Dan to sound before I knew anything about them. Just shitty porn music.
Instead, you listen to them and it's like, oh, it's good porn music.
Yeah, that was the impression I got. Now that I've learned a little more about their deal.
Anyway, continuing on with this week, I listened to the new project from William Basinski. It's an EP he released called Music for Abandoned Airports Tegel. This is a 20-minute track that I'd say it's pretty much just Eno worship, particularly ambient 1 and 4. And I mean, that's cool. I liked it and all. I'm not going to pretend I didn't enjoy 20 minutes of Eno worship. And this is notably an archival release from like the late 90s, before he had even done the work with disintegration loops. And you see how that sound evolved out of this, but this was an interesting look into the history of this man's career, but maybe not necessarily the most interesting album itself. Continuing on, from former Black Gaze band Lantløs, I listened to their new record, in their first album in 7 years, called Wildhund. This is a band, I had heard their first album, Melting Sun. I thought it was okay. It came out 7 years ago. I thought it had potential. I thought it sounded interesting. It was a lot of great texture and not a lot of great lyrical content. Yeah. And I'd say that's very similar of this new album also. The texture, the lush sound of it is immaculate, but a lot of the actual writing is pretty lame, not particularly interesting. It's an amalgamate of a lot of 90s shoegaze adjacent bands like Smashing Pumpkins, a bit of Deftones thrown in there. And it just ultimately, unfortunately, never ends up sounding as interesting as any of the acts they're obviously influenced by. So it was a little bit of a disappointment, but
lame ass album cover too.
yeah.
Especially considering Melting Sun's album cover is fucking
so
awesome.
Good. I
Oh, it's
also
awesome.
listened to that record this week, right? And these album covers are actually very good representations of the sonic palettes of each record.
Yeah, actually.
Like, this new one is a much harder turn into like alternative rock influence shoegaze and like black gaze itself. And I agree with August, but I would also add it's way like spottier. Like it hits really great moments, but much more occasionally than Melting Sun.
Melting Sun, yeah. I would say I would recommend checking out enough if you like the black gaze kind of sound. And final thing I'll mention this week, from the Seattle-based pop punk band Flop, I listened to their album Flop and the Fall of Mop Squeezer. This is a fucking awesome album.
Of course it is.
I did not expect that.
It is a tad repetitive because it is 38 minutes long and 18 tracks, but the actual pop punk and power pop infused into this is such a rich, fun mix, and they even managed to mix up the sound a bit. There's parts of this album that veer slightly into more heavy metal influenced territory, and a couple more mid-tempo songs. Hell, there's even like a blues lick that opens off the album. It's really fun, but also in the context of this being a Seattle, Washington pop punk album released in 1992, it is easy enough to see why this band's edge was kind of swallowed up by the very predominant grunge scene and how they didn't end up taking off. This album has like less than 100 ratings on Rate Your Music.
Yeah, what's it called again?
Flop and the Fall of Mop Squeezer.
Well,
yes,
I wrote it down the first. I wrote it down the first time. I just wanted you to say it again.
Yeah. But yeah, I enjoyed it a fair bit. It was pretty dope, and that's what I've been listening to.
The only thing I have been listening to of note, the only things, because there is two. One of them was the Foxing's debut album, which I liked quite a bit, but it's also, not particularly memorable, I would say. A lot of really good stuff on it. A couple tracks I will be returning to, but it didn't, if I were to listen to it when it came out, or, just independent of my thoughts on Nearer My God or this new one, I probably wouldn't think much of it at all, really, beyond this is good.
It's definitely like a record that benefits from its context in terms of the wave of like emo revival and Midwest emo music that was really happening at that point in the early 2010s. But also I'll say it's my least favorite Foxing album, so that you're not alone.
The other thing I listened to is the surprise release album from The Killers that was released yesterday. I don't want to say too much because we should cover it on here. But don't expect the last one under any circumstance.
Well, okay.
I think the best way I could describe it is if Punisher by Phoebe Bridgers and A Deeper Understanding by The War on Drugs had a baby, and I'm going to get real Ehrlich here. If they had a baby and it was written by Nebraska era Springsteen.
Morgan, did you just design that take in a lab just to make me
Wow.
squeak?
No, Jake, the fucking Killers did, and they made it an album.
I'm gonna
Losing
need a
my
moment.
mind.
Yeah, since you
I
were
need a second.
ever since you hyped this up yesterday, I've been very much looking forward to listen to it. The only reason I haven't yet is because of podcast stuff, but I'm probably going to put this on later tonight.
I didn't even know they had a new. What?
I've listened to it 6 times.
Oh my god!
I knew it was coming just because of like 5-second trailers on YouTube, and it just sounded like the Killers, but with this information, I'm not expectations.
Oh god,
are
I'm
duly
gonna
adjusted.
pee a little.
I mean, in some sonic senses, it certainly feels like of a kind of what they were trying to do with the last album.
Well, it's got the deeper understanding guy on it, doesn't it?
I don't think he's on it.
I thought it was the same producer.
I don't
Might have
know.
been. I don't know.
Possibly.
Well, the point is that in spirit and just general tonality, it is like absolutely nothing they've ever made.
Fair enough. All right, let's go.
Hell yeah.
And that's it.
Oh, cool. What have I been listening to this week? So I want to start with an album that I listened to for 2 reasons. One, I thought the album cover looked like it came out of El Topo. And 2, it's an August 10. And this album is called The Other by one Mr. King Tough.
Great record.
It sounds like the cover looks in that it's like El Topo if it was like chiller and vibey, you know. It's very like sweet sounding, amazingly produced, like psychedelic pop. I listened to it on a train and just closed my eyes and sat back and I vibed. And it's just, I really recommend it. The production's amazing. The songwriting's great.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. He's got the physical right there.
Damn.
Is that signed?
Yeah.
That is signed.
Holy shit.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
I saw them live. It was a fun show.
This is the only August 10 of the 15 August 10s. This is the only one I haven't heard. And I have to admit, the partial reason for that is that until recently, I mistakenly believed this to be an album by King Cruel, who I don't like. So I
not
avoided.
to interrupt Saoirse, but I just wanted to point out that one of the producers of the Killers album that we covered did in fact help produce the War on Drugs album, A Deeper Understanding, along with Broken Social Scenes, Hug of Thunder, Perfume Genius's No Shape, and Warpaint's Heads Up. So,
that's got to be, what's his name?
That dude.
it's fucking Sean Everett.
Yeah, Sean Everett. That's right. He's like
that dude.
He's like
He's good.
He's like
yeah, he might be okay.
He's indie rock production royalty.
Oh, he produced Home Video.
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah. He's that motherfucker's been around. He
That's
also,
a beautiful final.
there's also
And
another
Phoebe Bridgers' Metallica cover.
there's another thing he produced.
Phoebe Bridgers is on the Killers album.
Yeah, that's true also.
I'm going to die.
Anyway, yeah, what else did Everett produce? There's definitely something else
The
I was thinking
Voids.
of recently. Yeah, that too.
Virtue.
That too.
Oh, whoa. I did not make he produced The Other.
Oh wow.
There you
No
go.
shit.
I'm
There you go.
looking at it right now. What the
I'll just
fuck?
check the gatefold.
And
my
Casey Musgrave's Golden Hour and Awkward
God,
Waters in the
fuck.
Rainbow Rain.
Yes, like I said,
Jesus.
this dude is indie rock royalty, and
That's hilarious. Oh, yep.
Wow.
Mixed by Sean Everett right here.
there you go.
I'm so glad I followed that up because we went the most full circle that this podcast has ever gone.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah. Great, incredible talent. I think his his work on that Perfume Genius album, No Shape. That's in my opinion one of the best sounding and mixed indie records of the last decade.
Oh yes.
That album is just fucking immaculate and huge. Anyway, digress. Good guy, good album.
Yeah. The other's really good too. But so
I'm glad to hear that.
I took another recommendation from August from 2 weeks ago, and I think from Tyler as well. That being, I listened to Senazaz by a one Mr. Nicholas Jar, and I loved it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
It has so many cuts that are just really like beautifully hypnagogic and engrossing.
It's one of his most muted albums, I would say. So just keep that in mind when contextualizing his career. Like a lot of his other records are more kind of vibrant and loud, but that record is the joy of Senazaz is how kind of muted and textural and really kind of subtle its beauty is. So I'm pleased that you're vibing with that because not everyone has.
Yeah, it was just a really beautiful creation, you know. It just creates these really immaculate, very how do I put this? Very restrained soundscapes where the focus is more like attention to detail in terms of atmospheric choices, and I just found that like incredibly rewarding. So because we're talking about Lingua Ignota this week, I wanted to look at more. I'm going to try to get the genre name right because it's a pain in the ass to remember.
Neoclassical dark wave or some shit.
That's the one. That's it. So I wanted to listen to other music in that era to contextualize it. So I was listening to Caligula this week as well, which was that was a trip.
Great record.
Yeah, really good. But I checked out Within the Realm of the Dying Sun by Dead Can Dance, which has a 4.17 on Rate Your Music at the moment.
Holy shit.
It is from 1987. And from what I can glean, basically, this is a really early example of this genre. The band had been working in this mold beforehand, but this was the album which they really left behind guitar-driven music for more like orchestral sounding atmosphere, which I feel like is very influential over at least what I've heard of the albums in this niche. I thought it was really, really strong, especially like the last 3 or 4 tracks where it sort of all gradually builds an intensity and atmosphere. It's not as traumatic as Lingua Ignota's music, but what is, frankly, it's much more focused on the ambience and the growing sense of instrumental threat than on any explicit recounts of trauma.
Well, yeah, and it should be clear that what Lingua Ignota does is not a staple of the genre. In fact, she's been pretty vocal about like not really associating herself with any genre and not even being into neoclassical dark wave music at all. So that's but I'm glad you brought up Dead Can Dance actually, because I thought of them multiple times while listening to Sinner Get Ready this week. There's just, I think on the first track, but on other moments as well, there are just moments where Kristin's vocal timbre is very, very approximate of Lisa Gerard's vocal timbre on a lot of the best Dead Can Dance music. So that's definitely like a tradition of the way in which those operatic vocals are used in this very gloomy, in the case of Dead Can Dance's case, goth influenced aesthetic. So yeah, it's a cool connection.
Yeah, and if you want another sort of good reason to listen to it, from its year 1987, it's on Rate Your Music. It is number 4 in the ranking, only below Sign of the Times by Prince, Sister by Sonic Youth, and You're Living All Over Me by Dinosaur. So that's the echelon people who are not me, but have lumped it in with. What else have I listened to this week? Car Seat Headrest, Teens of Denial, 70 minutes of blissful indie rock. I loved it. It's so
my
much
favorite
fun.
Car Seat Headrest.
It's a great pick. It's one of those like indie rock albums that defined the decade in terms of indie rock. Like it was one of those
Drivers, Killer Whale.
It's just one of those like indie rock records where you have like a whole fucking smorgasbord of indie rock across the whole decade, and then there are these cherries that rise to the top and just do something so much more ambitious than any other records, and that's one of them. It's that and the
proud race.
That and the Twin Fantasy re-recording like back to back is like such a great kind of duology of like really progressive indie rock music.
The one song I took from it to include in the new like immediate bops playlist I'm working on was Destroyed by Hippie Powers, which just came right out of the gate with smashing guitars, which I just adored.
Yes.
My favorite part of that album is that like it's not technically a major label debut because they had a record called Teens of Style, which was like their Matador debut where they re-recorded old songs. But you can think of Teens of Denial as like a major label debut in the sense that it's all new material. And my favorite thing about it is that for a major label debut for this band that have brought up like built themselves on this wave of purely internet-based hype. It opens with a sample of a woman struggling to remember the name of the band.
Yep.
Which is great. It's just they really have a real sense of humor.
Car seat headrest.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, killer album and Wales.
Amazing. So the
Middle
other
of the Concordia. Sorry, I need to stop thinking about this album now.
The final album I want to talk about that I listened to this week is Piper at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd.
Banger.
Yeah, there's lots of really great shit on this record. I must confess, I did find myself slightly infuriated with certain moments on it where
Bike, perhaps.
Bike is the best song on the fucking album.
What in the goddamn hell are you
what
talking
the fuck
about?
are you even saying?
Well, it's definitely top 3 for me anyway.
Anno Domine, what are you? Stop. Get some help.
I love the moment on Bike where he goes, anything you want, thing. I just think
if you
really
want
cute.
thing. I just think of the Mike the Snare joke where he's just like, ooh, I want thing.
Yes. And I love the way that it ends with just like maniacal, like detuned laughter. Just
that is definitely an album that is written by Syd Barrett.
Yeah.
I think like it's obviously a really sort of influential, very great record. I just think there are moments where they're like emblematic of things I find very frustrating about Pink Floyd's earliest work, where it's I just want you to just sort of sit down and put in the kind of focus that produced Dark Side of the Moon, for the love of God.
See what you wouldn't be alone there. I've read a lot of sentiment that's in accordance with that, so don't feel bad or anything. But I have a real affection for that album, and it's kind of because it's nothing like anything else they made, really. Even Saucer Full of Secrets was automatically you see them going really into the more atmospheric progressive thing. But Piper at the Gates of Dawn is just this beautiful kind of time capsule of this very idiosyncratic weirdness that is so unique and I love it. I think I'd be very curious to get August's perspective on that record, actually, because there are certain aspects of it that remind me of like some of the really really proper weird music of the mid 60s and that sort of thing. So I feel like there might be a bit of an appeal there potentially, but it's very kind of like, it doesn't, especially with the music they've made since and the falling out of fashion of that kind of really weird arcane 60s music that's happened. It's definitely I can definitely see how it would throw some people completely off.
It is definitely an album that was released the same day as the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club. All right.
Oh yeah, totally.
Could you imagine the 60s versions of us doing the Jams and Tea podcast reviewing those two records?
We just make it all in like black and white and like fake video filters.
You're the kind of girl that fits in with my world. Also, like, just Interstellar Overdrive is just like nuts piece of music. It's just there in the middle of the album, and it's just like holy. It's like, I mean, is it the birth of prog rock? Possibly. 1966. That song is the earliest prog rock song I can think of.
Yeah, I'd have to do some really
yeah.
hard thinking if I had to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there is an answer.
It would have to be something
somewhere.
blues adjacent that would be before that, I would think, if I had to
Perhaps-
speculate at least.
Perhaps even some. I mean, I think the argument could also be made. Perhaps something even more jazz based than
Yeah,
what we would typically associate
perhaps.
with prog.
Sure, yeah. But I mean,
It's
like,
just amazing that we found a point in time where this debate can even happen. It's like, what the fuck? There was a
Yeah.
world before prog rock? I don't want to live there.
yeah. Anyway, I don't have much to shout out, and that's probably for the best since we're going to move on anyway. I will say one thing I listened to that I want to shout out very briefly is I listened to Outtake there's a project that they're associated with, or they were associated with. I don't think it's long active anymore. It was mainly a thing in the 90s, a collective of artists called Guesscom. And it's this very kind of mysterious collective that no one really kind of knew anything very much about. They just knew that it was like, there were specific names other than Rob Brown and Sean Booth that were associated with it. But with any given Guesscom release, and they didn't really release albums, they just released EPs and singles throughout the 90s. With every given Guesscom release, no one ever really knew which members of this mysterious collective were involved in it. But I listened to the most kind of widely beloved Guesscom release, which is an EP called Key Now, which came out in 1996. And I'm basically certain, and I've borrowed this from a bit of a discussion that was had on a recent episode of the Outtake podcast, but I'm basically certain this is just an Outtake project under a different name. It's very much like akin to a lot of the sounds they were working with in the Chiastic Slide era. In fact, there's one track on here, Key Now 4, which basically has the same sort of melody as Chiastic Slide and almost reads like an early version of that song, although it's different in other respects. But it's a really solid, really strong EP. Like the 4 tracks there's not really any that are noticeably weaker than each other. They're all 4 really good tracks. So if that kind of arcane sort of 90s, but dirtier kind of aesthetic of that particular era of Outtake appeals to you, then the Key Now EP is a worthy listen. But yeah, I don't really have anything else to shout this week. So let's move into our first review of the day, which is for Lingua Ignota. Is the musical outfit project of one Miss Kristin Hayter, this project has developed a lot of acclaim and a lot of discussion and a lot of attention over the time that it has been around making music. This is the 3rd album that she has made under this name, and as she's spoken, it kind of informally completes a trilogy of records that began with the previous albums, All Bitches Die and Caligula. And so these are 3 albums that are deeply tied in terms of a lot of the thematic aspects of these records. Some of the sonic...
Is Kristin Hayter actually her real name?
Kristin Hayter. Yes, I see what you're doing.
That is like the
holy
best
shit!
real
I didn't
name
even
ever.
think about that.
Holy shit, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it's that's funny. Kristin Hayter, I get it. Yeah, yeah. Well done.
I just thought of Christian Slater instead of what you were actually going for.
Oh wow. Okay.
Stupid.
Hang on, give me a second here. Yeah. So yeah, Sinner Get Ready is, I suppose, the long-awaited follow-up to Caligula, which was the album that really kind of broke her in terms of, I guess, the dominant cultural narrative of alternative / experimental music, inverted quotes there. And an album that resonated with a lot of people for some of its incredibly oppressive themes of abuse and subjugation and rage and hatred and death and all of these very specific and very emotionally charged qualities that record had. Its frequent forays into textural exercises in noise as well that are infused into an aesthetic that is, as we kind of alluded to in our what we've been listening to segment, frequently kind of tied into the influences of early neoclassical dark wave music. The other artist that she gets lumped in with as well as modern artist she gets lumped in with as well as Anna von Hauswolf, which is, you know, I can see the surface level similarities in terms of some of the things that they do. They're both obviously very powerful performers, but it's fair to say that Kristin, as the Lingua Ignota project, has this very singular aesthetic and quality to it that instantly marks everything that she does as an unmistakable product of her and of her particular style, which is heavily, heavily personal. So, yeah, and I mean, that's basically, you don't need to give a heck of a lot more context for this record. When we have, as we discuss this record, we'll go into the thematic background of this record, how it thematically links to her previous work, how it thematically separates itself from her previous work as well, the different sort of perspectives on some of these core topics that this album takes, and just the general, I suppose, complicated theses of this album, the ideas that it represents, how they are complemented and accentuated by this very specific sonic aesthetic that itself is quite different to the aesthetic of her previous records. And so I think probably Jake might have been the longest running fan of Lingua Ignota in this podcast. So Jake, why don't you talk about, or kind of build on this sort of foundation in terms of what this record is specifically and how you approach it?
I think the most obvious thing with Sinner Get Ready is, well, I mean, you obviously can't really escape the shadow of the fact that Caligula was a very, it was, her breakout record, and it was very critically acclaimed when it came out. And I think another really important thing to talk about with Caligula is the insanely impassioned performances from Kristin. I mean, it's like she goes from this very classically trained like vocal performance that's very like traditional, but very obviously quite measured and with an air of kind of theatricality, and one might even say camp. But her ability to just pivot and go directly into just full-blooded black metal screaming, which with the style of production she does, which is notably a lot more stripped back, it means that her voice and presence in her music is the biggest, most important thing. And you have Caligula, which is this longer record that mostly features her doing that, and it's a very agonizing experience. For as much as I love Caligula, it's an album I've only heard 2-3 times because it was really the only amount of times I could stomach it, because it's such a dark, very obviously personal, but still very heavily laden in metaphor and mythos when it comes to the actual text within it. But the pain and emotion is always there. So the difference with Sinner Get Ready is that kind of impassioned, heavy, screaming performance is largely not to be seen here. Sinner Get Ready is a decidedly more, I won't even say it's more focused, it's just a little bit more, you can tell that Kristin has a bit tighter grasp on what she's going for. It's a bit less raw when it comes to its aesthetics, and a bit more raw when it comes to the complexity of the emotions that are on display here. The sort of thing that you would expect from Kristin, those performances of those, those screams, those blood-curdling, chilling moments are really only found on one song here. The rest of it is decidedly more, I described it to Tyler earlier in the DMs as being an apocryphal opera of sorts. And I won't beat around the bush anymore. I've been mildly obsessed with this album ever since it's dropped, and I've been listening to it over and over and over again. And as my opening segment alluded to, I've been listening to this in basically the best environment possible. And this is just, it's gotten under my skin in just every way possible, to the point where you would fear that something like this might dull upon re-listen, that a lot of the really sharp themes might, it might dull its edge if you expose yourself to it upon repetition. And honestly, the more I think about it and the more I just parse through everything that she's bringing to the table, thematically speaking, the more I just kind of fall in love with it. The thing with Caligula is that it's a very raw expression of abuse and subjugation, and it's very obvious, and that's not to the album's detriment, but here there is so much to dive into. I think that you could write an essay about really the first 3 tracks which really feel of at peace for me. The Order of Spiritual Virgins really coming out and having this really memorable kind of hook with her vocals of the hide your children, hide your husbands, just sort of a like almost as if she's being like paraded into a town and everyone is hiding from her as if she's a biblical plague. It's also focused on her emphasizing femininity of sorts, hide your children, hide your husbands. Obviously, that's leaving out a particular type of person. And the title, as it invokes the Order of Spiritual Virgins. So there's a distinctly, I think, feminine angle to her music and the approach here. And these sort of opening 3 songs here kind of feel like Caligula condensed into 3 songs, but added and elaborated upon into the incredible song I Who Bend the Tall Grasses, which is Lingua Ignota basically bringing before before a deity or a godlike presence the source of what she wants to take out her revenge and anger on, maybe a former lover, a former abuser, a former something that she has a deep connection to. And she has this she kind of lures you into the whole oh, she's not doing that whole intense thing she did before, but then she breaks out the ever memorable line that's been repeating in my head over and over again of just kill him, I'm not asking. And she feels like she is owed this by this divine creature that she's been serving, almost as if she's traded her own agency to create a new form of subjugation in herself and of herself, as if she's traded power in exchange to exert her will over this former lover, this man, but she in turn has become subjugated in a different way, trading it in the sense.
I think what's kind of key about it is the desperation that she has in this song. Like it's not, me, it's not a song where she, at least as I see it, possesses any kind of power. It's a song where she's kind of pleading to have some sort of power to exert. And I think this is a consistent thing about the record, is that she constantly inhabits the state of oppression, of subjugation, and of, I guess, languishing in a punishment that she feels that she's earned. And that's, I think, what's adds this sort of additional layer of depth to it. I mean, if it were just this sort of not that I'm suggesting you say this, but I think if someone generally were to suggest that it were just this song about kind of wishing revenge upon your, evil, your abuser or whatever, I think that would cheapen the really complex emotional tone of the song. And also, again, and you've sort of segued or hinted at this beautifully, but its relationship to the songs around it as well. It's meaningful, I think, that the opening track is kind of from the perspective of God, and then the second track is from the perspective of this devotee to God, and you have this dynamic between the two that the record kind of explores.
It's kind of got the feeling that she sort of has her view on God is very distinctly nihilistic, but it's in the way that it's nihilistic that's interesting to me, is that it's sort of definitely an uncaring or dispassionate God on this album, whereas I think Caligula displayed a cruel God, which it's sort of, she displays the differences between the two on each album and the kind of torment and misery that come from both of them. And here it's sort of that kind of thing that Tyler alluded to, of just kind of the raw agony of it's almost as if she's been given power as an acolyte of this God, as a devotee, but she can't do anything with that power. She is just trading one form of subjugation for another form. It's just that one is divine, and she has the power, but she, it's being held by whoever she's given herself over to. And it translates into many hands which is one of the most harrowing songs I've heard all year. There's these the way she layers her vocals of just like, she never creates a harmony on this album that's like strictly a harmony. They're just these vocal performances that kind of loop in on each other at awkward times that make this really uneasy, unnerving feeling of just like, it's like a choir, but it's like a choir that feels both almost dispassionate and like drones, and they're all kind of off key, and it's just so fucking unsettling. And then she says shit like, I have many fingers for all of your holes, and it's like it's disgusting. And it's so
like,
fucking gross to listen to.
Well, for me, and this is something that's a technique I see her do across almost all of the music I've heard from her at this point. And it really evokes like Gregorian monks chanting in a way.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and like I think what's so interesting about that, and it chimes to something I wanted to add with what you guys were saying earlier, right? You're talking about like these very deeply Christian ideas, very deeply Catholic ideas, and the ways in which they can be sort of perverted by the pitfalls of human existence, right, in a way. And it almost evokes like an almost like Lovecraftian idea to me, especially that song you mentioned before where she's begging the deity. It evokes so many ideas of like the God that is beyond our comprehension, where our concerns are completely outside of their scope.
A formless God, something that's beyond us.
I could directly quote like The Shadow over Innsmouth as a story in which our worship of that entity strips us of our own humanity, but there still might be catharsis in that, right?
Yeah. August, what were you saying?
I was gonna say, I think in the way you say that, Saoirse, it also reminds me of how Michael Gira of Swans writes about authority and power and religion.
I like that.
Yeah,
in that very same disconnected, disparate way. And
but the reason I think the chanting works so well to tie into that is like that is an idea of religion that is outside of almost anything we understand today. It's very arcane, it's very archaic, and the dispassionate nature of it also evokes that kind of uncaring God that's larger than you, right? And it does a lot of that work without ever telling you that's what it's doing, you know?
Yeah, it is worth adding bringing in some more kind of contextual information at this point, I think, as well, to kind of deepen our discussion. So this album was written during a time in which Kristin moved to rural Pennsylvania for a relationship, and she became kind of immersed in fascinated with the kind of history of the kind of really sort of in religious groups and the kind of extremist history of deep history of rural Pennsylvania. And there's a lot of references to that throughout this record, and even specific locations within rural Pennsylvania within song titles on this album as well. And so it's this very specific kind of landscape that she's been immersed in and the isolation of that landscape as well, that I think informs a lot of just the general tone and atmosphere. And with regard to the relationship with God thing, I think what Lingua Ignota, what Kristin often goes for, is this notion of a kind of coupling with God, a kind of unity between God and the subject, that is this relationship forged in violence, essentially, and punishment, and there's obvious parallels to real life abusive relationships. And that was the foundation of Caligula, right? That whole parallel between abusive relationships and the relationship between God and his subjects was the kind of foundation for that record, and it's very much continued here. What's different, I think, between the two records is the tone of Kristin's attitude towards this concept. In Caligula, it was this kind of broiled rage and just fiery fury, and in Sinner Get Ready, it's this kind of despair and resignation, and more than that, it's a kind of embrace of the pain and of the punishment, and it's even at points a begging for it. And so it's interesting that second song stands out to so many people, because in many ways it's kind of like the outlier on the record, in the sense that for most of this album, Kristin is really absorbed in this perspective of someone who is fully, completely begging for self-destruction, begging to be abused, essentially, rather than to wield power themselves, or to be some kind of second order purveyor of that. And I think that is absolutely encapsulated in a lot of the tracks here, and I'll circle back to Many Hands myself, because I think that's another that I agree with Jake that's one of the sort of key songs on the album, and it's also kind of a neat example of one of the aesthetic principles of the record as well, which is the beauty of dissonance. And so something we obviously praise a lot that is easy and satisfying to do is a rich and pristine harmony between elements, whether it is the harmony of two instruments producing a note in tandem, or whether it is the harmony of different instruments creating a sound that feels holistically unified. That combination that makes you feel warm, the backbone of what we think of as beauty in music. But the beauty of dissonance, this kind of seemingly contradictory idea, is something that I think deserves equal appreciation. And it is something that I think Kristin really pursues in the musical arrangements on this record. Not all of them. Some of them are more restrained in this very kind of conventionally beautiful way, but there's always a sense of eeriness to it even then. But particularly in some of the more I would say abrasive songs on this record, like Many Hands and Repent Now, Confess Now, for instance, she really kind of, I think, examines this aesthetic idea rather than solely seeing dissonance as this stage before a resolution that makes the resolution meaningful. It is equally important sometimes to linger in the dissonance, and it's meaningful the way that Kristin lingers in the dissonance because it musically complements the dissonance of the relationship between Kristin and God that is happening thematically throughout this record as well. And so that I think is a meaningful marriage of principle and concept. And I know that Kristin is kind of classically trained in music, so these kinds of things very heavily inform the way that she composes. And those dissonant, really like detuned is almost underselling the sound of those acoustic guitars on Many Hands. Mm-hmm. The way they kind of plug through the song monotonously as well, they're just kind of hitting this very same dissonant sound over and over and over and over. As a detail in isolation, it is evocative, but it's not really meaningful. But when placed in contrast with the droning backing tone of the song, and then you have Kristin's longing devotional vocal, you get a sense of it's not just this one dissonant piece, but it's that the entire piece is in a dissonance with itself and with everything that's going on in it. And she will use her voice to emphasize this as well. She'll double track it on certain lines to harmonize on an unpleasant note. And the lyrics, again, depict this abusive relationship within the context of God and his devotees. The title, of course, referring to the maxim that Jesus will lay his hands upon his subjects and heal them. Although here it's God in the song, and he has many hands, which makes him removes that human element that he is often projected with and makes him into this monster through that alone. And then the hands are being used to invade, to assault, and to violate his subject sexually. The Lord spat and held me by my neck. I would die for you. I would die for you. He wept. The Lord held me by my neck. I wish things could be different. He wept. So you have an obvious, depiction of an abusive relationship that is happening here. I think that's as obvious as the record gets into kind of doing that Caligula thing of directly tying that these kinds of relationships as that manifest in the real world versus in these kind of religious texts. But it's incredibly powerful. And the reason the song is so effective is because of all of these examples of dissonance, both within individual things, between different elements, and then within what Kristin is doing vocally, the dissonance between lines like I would die for you and I wish things could be different, the dissonance between the specific violence that's being inflicted and the love that he is claiming to be bestowing. You know, all of these different things are in this horrific dissonance, which is what makes it so unpleasant. And what's powerful about this album is the ways in which Kristin is able to layer these various different forms of it, such that when you first listen to it, it's overwhelming. And then the more you listen to it, the more you pick up on all of the ways that these different elements are interplaying in this deliberately wrong way. And it just feels wrong in so many different ways. And that's why I think Many Hands is one of the best tracks here, because it gets that feeling of wrongness, of not having conclusion, of existing in the state of suffering and unanswered questions, unanswered calls to God, unanswered resolution, in all of these different ways. And it is breathtaking.
Yeah, one of the things that I really love too about Many Hands is specifically like the way I put it before is honestly selling the song short, because it also kind of deals with the sort of symbiotic relationship that one can have in a relationship or in an abusive relationship with someone, where there's almost an interchangeability between the two and what happens to them, and how, you know, it's both like she obviously has complicated feelings on this. It's not like she fully hates this person. She's like, you know, she's still referencing things like the love that they felt or something. There's always a complexity to her writing, and it is always matched by the music. And I can definitely understand if, you know, if somebody is like, I think the writing on this album is really great, or I think Kristin's a really powerful performer, but like, this is definitely a very, very specific kind of musical approach that I think leads to Kristin's singularity as an artist, in that it's very minimal. Most of this album is in fact carried by her performances, her very theatrical, very heavy performances. I mean, there are definitely exceptions, those dissonant details that Tyler's talking about, but like, they're still very, like, construction wise, they're very minimal. And I think that's to the album's benefit, in my opinion, just because it makes these choices stand out so much so. Like, the album could literally just be her vocal performances and it would still be pretty fucking outstanding. It's just the instrumentation, in being stripped back and in being so singular, while it may not evoke the same kind of traditional musical ideas that a lot of other people and a lot of other artists may use to, you know, kind of engender these feelings in their audiences, it makes everything stand out and feel very, very much like that dissonance is very intentional. There's like a progressive like mentality that's going into the construction of the tunes here, like something like the musically compelling nature of something like the Order of Spiritual Virgins, where it just kind of starts out as that kind of droning and like lyrical passage, and then there are just these fucking like random explosions of noise that happen at completely separate intervals midway through the song to like the end, where it just sounds like somebody's taking a drum and like holding onto it and then barreling themselves down the stairs in like a metal factory, and you're just kind of like, whoa, what the fuck was that? And there's like this weird electronic like simmering at the very beginning that kind of shows up too on occasion, and it's so evocative of not only like the setting and imagery but the feeling. And Many Hands is too. I think that that's one of the standout tracks just because of how specific it becomes. And I think that too, on I Who Bend the Tall Grass is one of my favorite parts, is just how she sets herself up to be sort of like, she has this voice that's very similar to the perspective of God on the first one. She's kind of stoic. It's a little bit reserved in her delivery. And then she just instantly, she gets more desperate and desperate, pleading for this figure to kill her abuser, just being like, I'm not asking, just do it. And like, and it's not the only way that she feels. There's a complexity that continues and goes into something like Pennsylvania Furnace, which I don't know if, like, because we've barely talked about this album together, but Pennsylvania Furnace is one of the best songs of the year, in my opinion. On every single level, this song floors me and feels like a moment for not just this album, but for Kristin in general. I think it's one of the most accessible, like traditionally accessible songs, but also utterly fucking heartbreaking when you just read all of this. One of the best lines in the entire album and of the entire year is, the one thing that I learned is that everything burns. Like,
Yeah.
oh God,
So,
damn.
Yes, what I have to say on this, I won't get into it completely, but because I like the fact that we're kind of moving our way through this slowly, but This was the first single for the record, which is notable, and I think understandable why, because how do you kind of prepare people for a record like this? You have to sort of lull them into it. And I think it's a great tone setter. But also, like, I loved it as a single. I heard it once or twice, and I didn't want to listen to it more than that because I just didn't want to get too used to it in isolation. But I loved it in isolation. But then when you hear it in the album, it is like this whole different level of fucking brutal and heartbreaking. Like, the story in this song, it's based on I think a folk tale about an iron master who throws his dogs into the fire, and then they return out of the fire to drag him down to hell with them, which is reflected in the lines like, "Do you want to be in hell with me?"
Me and the dog, we die together is the final line of the song. Which
and the first line as well. There's a circularity there too. So it's incredibly powerful in that simple image that's being seen, that is being set, and the implications of it for all of the other things that we have talked about. And Kristin's performance on this song is utterly breathtaking. The vocal range that she displays is one thing, but the ability that she has to adjust the way that she uses her voice to make every specific intonation hit with its own unique flavor of devastation, depending on what it is that she is voicing, what it is that she is saying, where it is that she is at in the song, is unreal. Like, by the time she gets to that point where she's just howling above all others, over and over and over and over again. Above all others, I fear your voice. Above all others, I fear your name. Obviously, the connection to the things we've already talked about is clear there. But what's so impactful is not just the clear connection that comes with the context of the album, although that is part of the beauty of the song, but just how, and this is not something that's easy to do, how impactful that delivery is. Like, the lyric itself isn't meaningful, but it's nothing without, or it's a fraction of that without the way in which she delivers it. That real sort of just feels like she's summoning some kind of energy to voice the sheer intensity of the emotion. And that's what sells it, is that you feel that Kristin is living through something in the way that she vocalizes. And I'm sure that she is. I mean, that's, I think, an aspect of this record where even if you don't know the backstory, purely in the way that she throws herself into her music, you can tell that this is not some pure theatrical exercise, that there is a real tangible just darkness that she's drawing from that is very explicit in the music, and that is what makes her so confronting, and I would say so quite difficult for a lot of people to adjust to, but it's very kind of distilled into its simplest form on Pennsylvania Furnace, which is what makes it such a great single track that works as this devastating piece in isolation, but then becomes even more impactful with the context of what surrounds it.
What I like about this track is it almost feels like a thematic meditation on burning and fire itself.
Oh yeah,
you know?
That's the image it conjures to mind.
That's something she has spoken about, as well as the idea of the iconography and the image and what fire represents, both this destructive force and this cleansing force as well in equal measure. Again, a contradictory element that is, very in keeping with a lot of the other kind of literary tools and devices that she uses.
Yeah, and just something I want to say before I forget, because if I don't, I will forget, which is like the album I thought of most listening to this record was the last Liturgy record, actually.
I can see that.
Yeah.
It is like a direction for an artist combining their previous work with a much more like less aggressive palette of instruments and working it into what they do, but also has that huge thematic sweep to it, telling really huge emotions in that operatic way.
Well, it's also like an album about the creation of the universe, right? About God. So that obvious parallel is there as well. And I want to clarify
Yes.
something about my feelings on the relationship between this album and Caligula as well. I want it to be known that it's not that I think that that this is a more cohesive or better structured or anything than Caligula. I think we in our heaping of praise to this record, we shouldn't like inadvertently diss that album, because I think that album
course,
is absolutely immaculate in the way that it's pieced together. I don't think it's any less thematically impactful or coherent or all tied together. But the difference is, I think that this album, in terms of what it investigates, the ideas it looks at, is just thornier. It's more complicated. It's more something that we don't really get a lot in art. It's this really complicated set of emotions and this complicated relationship that is explored in this way that feels, and again, it's not to detriment Caligula, but it's just it's going down this much more, I guess, just layered thing that is so of its own piece, whereas Caligula is very tied to All Bitches Die. They're very much similar records that are about similar concepts and similar core ideas, and Caligula is very much kind of like the idea of just refining that into this cohesive, lengthier statement. But Sinner Get Ready feels very much like I said at the start, it's like it's taking some of these ideas of worship and of pain and of suffering, and it's not exclusive to the religious context as well. Like, something else I haven't got into is there's a whole bunch of subtextual ways you can interpret the religious elements of this record as pure metaphor if you want to. But anyway, yeah, I think that should be clear that these are both admirable and great and very cohesive records in their own right.
Caligula was one of my favorite albums that year, and I'm glad you made that distinction, because if I can put it in a succinct way, they're just, I mean, and at the risk of sounding like a fucking foaming at the mouth fanboy, is that I just frankly think they're two different forms of masterpiece.
Sure.
I think that Caligula is like, Sinner Get Ready is more holistic. It's a little bit more like, it's just a bit more encompassing, whereas Caligula is more focused on its niche. It's refining itself to hit a specific nerve and doing a perfect job of hitting that nerve, whereas this is an all sensory fucking experience, which, I mean, no better way to describe a song like Pennsylvania Furnace. But one thing that gets me too is that, like, when listening to this, the theatricality, I don't just say that in the sense that, like, she's kind of got like an animated campy thing that she's got going on, but she's still able to ride and so that you can take her seriously. But theatricality in the sense that listening to this is like watching a stage play. This is like listening to an audio form of a theater production by one woman. And it gets a lot of novelty out of that. And at the risk of sounding way too big brain Jake here, two comparisons I want to make, one for the song and one for an album as a whole. And of course, knowing me, it's both related to that of Steven Wilson. First of them, the only other album that feels like this tonally to me, and especially in the emotion that it invokes and the lyrical content, is Opeth's Damnation, which is entirely a stewing of purgatorial and moral and even kind of just an exploration of utter despair and just sort of walking and wading through it, and things like abuse, ideation, all of those elements are together, even though obviously they're nothing sonically alike. But the song that Pennsylvania Furnace reminds me of, in the feeling that it conjures up in me, is Heart Attack and a Lay-By on In Absentia.
Wow.
It feels like it conjures that same feeling of, oh God, I want to die. I want to die so badly.
Yeah.
And that interiority that it displays too is just, it's very similar to me.
They're like also like they capture a feeling of like slowed time within a kind of moment of suffering. So yeah, that's a very, very, very podcast core comp, and I can't hate.
Yeah.
It's a good comp.
I've been thinking about it too much, so of course my brain eventually went there.
Yeah,
We really do need a Steven Wilson sign.
we
We
do.
do. I'm proud to be able to usher in something like that if that's what it takes. And hey, we're talking about shit like religious apocrypha and like witches and all this shit. I'm sure we can find a way to bring up the Mars Volta too.
Yeah, I need a lot of signs. God, so this is
Oh, there's your Outtake.
there we go. I'm surprised how like we've been done a good job of starting to dig into it. I'm surprised how much I haven't even gotten to yet in terms of the other aspects of this record.
Because she's thick.
But like, okay, so I have a lot of quotes from her that I'm going to kind of refer to as this discussion goes on. And on the opening track, the note of the opening track, just to return to that for a minute, she specifically stated that it's intended as a bridge between Caligula and this album.
Ooh.
Like it's continued as this album is intended as a kind of like, not a continuation per se, but like certainly again, because she's made a note of these 3 albums as kind of being like a trilogy. And so you can listen to that record and then put this record on and see a sense of the ways in which they're different, but also the ways in which certain things are continuing. And so that's something I thought was interesting that she said. She noted that the order of spiritual virgins relates to the cloisters at Ephrata, which is a small monastic society in Pennsylvania in the 1700s. One kind of example of the ways in which she's kind of drawn on the local history of the place she was when she wrote this record. And what's relevant about that is that they were hardcore ascetics. And a lot of that was based around repressed sexuality. And the sexual aspect of this record is another big aspect of, or subtextual part of the theme of the things that this record explores. The subservience to God frequently manifesting as sexual submission, which even ties into the album cover, which I didn't know this, but I learned that apparently on this album cover, Kristin is wearing what is called a chastity and eroticism mask, but she describes it as an angelic gimp mask. And it's this specific piece of ephemera intended to represent one's physical commitment to God as master.
Parallels to Ken Russell's The Devil's Continues.
Yeah, but
which this is very similar to.
But she also likes it because it has this kind of aggressive character to it as a piece of headwear as well, in the way that it obscures her. So yeah, that's a cool like little hint at that. And so there is like certain ways in which I think Kristin leaves the door open throughout parts of this record for you to intone a kind of these kind of like real sort of sexual undertones to a lot of the things that are being said. Eternal devotion in every sense as she sings over and over and over again on that opening track between those thunderous blasts of noise. The production on this record as well, something else I want to just bring up, is for the most part rich and spacious, though there are also certain elements, distinct elements of certain tracks that are more oppressive and claustrophobic, purely in terms of like mixing. And that includes like the synth layering during the beginning of that opening track, and also the organ tone of I Who Bend the Tall Grasses, which is so intense in the way that it hangs and hums that it even is compressed and distorted a little bit. I've talked about how I like the ways in which these 2 songs are kind of represent a dynamic between God's perspective and the subject's perspective, and his devotee at their most intense and despairing. My choice line from that second track is actually "Where does your light not shine?" Which is this kind of desperate, it could be this genuine question that is being asked, or it could be like a lament that no matter where they are, they're not they can never escape being under the umbrella or under the omnipotent view of this figure. And the oppressive tone of the soundscape here, that distortion that's lathered on, or the compression that's lathered onto that organ just a little bit, is great because it complements the narrow and claustrophobic mental headspace of the Panic's protagonist in this song. And that's another thing that I love about the ways in which production on this album complements lyrics and subject matter. So when this character is in their most frenzied and panicked and claustrophobic state, then the ways in which the instrumentation is mixed, even on more minimal songs, reflects that. And I think this second track is a great example. And then as the record progresses and some of that, I guess, intensity and panic and raw despair dissipates and gives way to a kind of muted, solemn acceptance of this state of things, then as that shift in emotional tone happens, you get more spacious mixes. You get generally more withdrawn pieces of music that complement that shift beautifully. It's another just great example of the ways in which Kristin has really considered composition from every possible angle in terms of the holistic work and the ways in which the individual pieces are constructed. So that's great. I love the way that compression on that organ in the second track is so, it's just perfect. It's just wrong enough to great, but also like in combination, again, it's not about the things, the instrumental parts in isolation, it's about how they combine together. And in combination with Kristin's vocal, that grating, slightly grating tone adds a real sort of dynamic to the musicality of the song that complements the intensity. And it feels like the protagonist's brain is bulging in their skull. Their heart is swelling in their rib cage. They're about to burst apart with rage and despair, is how the song makes you feel. So yeah, I think that is, and also just one more thing I'll mention, and then I'll kind of take a back seat again to catch a breather. But Jake kind of mentioned how this record is more minimal than Caligula, and broadly that is true. And certainly the really kind of spare elements of songs like Pennsylvania Furnace and which was the other one I was thinking of, the Perpetual Flame of Centralia, which is these two much more minimal songs, are good entry points into the record. They were the singles and good breathers, but also I would also add to that this record is, yes, it's not as loud and heavy as Caligula, but also the mixes and the instrumentation is really kind of dense in a lot of places and quite fascinating. In fact, you have a lot of really obscure acoustic instruments that Kristin actually bought while antique shopping in rural Pennsylvania, specifically to try and find really kind of obscure and often sort of historical instruments that could be added into the mix of these songs to just have these little wee seasoned details that add a little bit of that subtext to the songs and also contribute to the dissonance that I've already talked about as well. And so those largely Appalachian instruments, there's frequently the use of banjo on this album as well, particularly on Man Is Like a Spring Flower, where the banjo is very prominent, that add this really nice flavor to it that really help embed you within the scene and again add to the detail of these mixes. So yes, they're minimal, but when you take what's going on even in the minimal moments, you see this tapestry of sounds that are pieced together in this very finessed way that this is part of the joy of spending time with this album this week is discovering all of these little nooks and crannies in it. And I love that aspect of it.
I should have been more clear. I really just meant from, not in reference to Caligula. I just think this album, like from a purely like, from a normal music listener's perspective, if you go in without the context of Lingua Ignota and just like want to check this out because it's getting high praise and whatever,
Totally.
and you expect it to be this like dense sonic experience, it's not that. So completely understandable if that's something that turns you away, because it is very much just like, it's a feature, but it's not necessarily a feature that I can see working for everybody. So, mileage may vary.
Mm.
A lot of my thoughts are admittedly not terribly specific to individual songs, just because I think the nature of this record being very dense, I felt it more appropriate to take it at its own pace. Which is to say, this is a record I find very interesting, but I know I am not even close to my final thoughts on it. But what I have for now, I do really like the kind of folky, almost pastoral sound to a lot of this record. I think that really contributes to the rural Pennsylvania vibe and aesthetic that Lingua Ignota is trying to infuse this record with. I think the intensity of Kristin's screams when she uses them are just paralyzing, and even without fully understanding this album's lyrical content, as I think I don't, because this is a very densely written album. I think the record's tone is just perfect because I remember my third listen of this distinctly. I just felt incredibly anxious throughout listening to the whole thing, which is a feeling that is very well done and I think very hard to pull off successfully. Just how stomach churning the record sounds with its really unique blend of instrumentation, which I thought was very diverse throughout the whole thing. The first two tracks or so I found a tad samey in their execution, but generally speaking, I thought it was a diverse enough experience that the new musical ideas being presented were consistently engaging me and keeping me hooked throughout. Lyrically, I guess a lot of what I got out of it, myself at least, was ideas and references to just infidelity in general is something I took away from a lot of these tracks. And yeah, that general dishonesty, kind of this dishonesty, which I think can tie into that abusive relationship aspect, is referenced when Ignota brings up the Serpent of Eden at points in the lyrics to convey this idea of dishonesty, but also this idea of dependence, which Jake addressed earlier, which is, yes, a metaphor for both an abusive relationship, but I think also a metaphor for religion in general, the need, a God needing humans to exist to worship them, the idea of man creating God or God creating man being a very powerful image evoked throughout this album. The really a chicken and the egg argument, which I think is a really interesting metaphor used for that aforementioned abuse. So I guess in general, that was a lot of my more surface level thoughts on this album.
I like that you brought up infidelity specifically too, because that's like, you can take that as infidelity in the context of relationship or infidelity in the context of religion itself, and the way that the main character can kind of like, the way the character has been compromised in terms of faith in a relationship, but has to give faith in order to a God or divine being in order to seek the punishment that she desires. So I think that's a really good thing to point out too.
Yeah, and it dovetails nicely into the next thing I wanted to bring up, which I think is kind of one of the definitive things I think that I've read Kristin say about this album in the AMA that she did on Reddit. And she spoke, the context was a question where she confirmed that she feels that some reviewers are making this a little too much about a condemnation of religion, which we've avoided doing. We've kind of talked about the religious ideas and the attachment to it. But she says the meaning behind this album is far more nuanced and personal than my feelings on religion, and woven with my own life of the past year. I think the record is about seeking God and not finding him. What we do to seek God, when do we see him in others, in ourselves? It is about desperately wanting to not be spiritually barren. And in my own life, it was about wanting to be loved and not being loved. And that, I think, is the best sentence you could possibly sum up this entire album with. It is about wanting to be loved and not being loved. It is about not receiving reciprocation. It is about looking for God. It is about looking for closure. It is about looking for resolution and not finding it. And she kind of builds on this with detailing of her relationship with her faith. And she describes it as complicated. Do I believe in God? I don't know. Probably. I believe in the ruthless way of things and that I will get what's coming to me. My relationship is much more aesthetic and intellectual than anything. I don't consider myself a spiritual person at all. God and Lingua Ignota is almost always about making another your higher power. God is almost always interchangeable with the abuser or the lover. And so this gets into another potential sort of interpretation of this record, which is dovetails with what August said about the notion of sort of betrayal or in some kind of compulsion. And that is the subtext that I think Kristin has been very deliberate about not giving too much detail into a personal situation that she doesn't want to go into. But in an interview with Stereogum, she said that this album is about my most recent relationship and dealing with somebody who struggles with addiction. It's about not being able to be loved and never being enough, especially when the addiction is to other people, she said. It was also about her physical experience of moving to a new remote location, knowing absolutely no one except her partner, and thus, I guess, reinforcing that dependence. I'm in this rural space where it feels like I never actually know what's going on. The grandiose metaphors of Christianity felt to Kristin like a perfect place to hide her pain in plain sight. I try not to be super confessional in my language, she says, and to obfuscate all of that with biblical and allegorical imagery without ever actually talking about myself. And this isn't to say that all of these religious themes we've talked about aren't the record, and they absolutely are. And that's her interest, and that's how she manifests the core ideas of not having reciprocated love, of being dependent on another person, of dependence in general, whether it is on another person, whether it is on a substance, whether it is on some tangible thing that is outside of you. And how the very nature of dependence, the very nature of addiction, the very nature, however you want to describe it, the very nature of that thing, of you and an other that are separate and not tied, therefore creating an unbalanced relationship, even on like a purely physical level, and an unbalance between you and a thing that you rely upon, or a thing that you need in some way. And that, I think, is at the core of the record. And so I think the sense of betrayal that might be intuited, the sense of perhaps infidelity, or however you want to manifest betrayal from these lyrics, can be, again, simplified and brought back to this idea of wanting something from someone, them not being able to give it to you, and the emotions that come as a result of not getting that thing from that source, whether it's anger, whether it is self-loathing, whether it is hatred, the sense of being adrift and being at odds with the people and the things in the world around you, and the psychological place that puts you in. I think that is the heart of this album.
Very much agree with that. I really like how interior it feels. It's just very much like, and again, the ambiguity too is that it feels like in some cases Kristin might in fact embody the very godlike presence that she's speaking of, and is aware of the fact that she is that to someone else who depends on her. There's just, every single time I interrogate anything on this album, I'm just hit with another way of just like, this inherently murky, complicated subject material can so easily be treated with a singular viewpoint, or a viewpoint that doesn't give the situation the nuance that it might deserve. But here, I feel like Kristin is fully committed to representing every single part and angle, like she's looking through one situation in like a prism with different lenses, and each song sort of presents another lens to sort of view this from. And that's what really lends a lot of it its, I guess, in more intellectual appeal, even though I think on a more visceral musical level, it still definitely evokes these things and just ups their potency.
Yeah. And I think I'm kind of basically just wrapping up now, because I'm just realizing that a lot of the stuff I've written down, I don't necessarily need to say. I've kind of boiled it down now. But just to I guess conclude my thoughts with how this idea of reliance on God and reliance on another person, and the sense of you make gods out of people in your life, right? And you let them rule over you, and you let those people subjugate you. It might be in the sense that they're actively doing that. They're actively taking advantage of you and abusing you. Or it might be in the sense that they're not necessarily doing anything, but you are projecting a sense of power onto them because you need to have that. And as a result of that, you're kind of dictating your own suffering, which is a very complicated idea that could be very easily misread or misunderstood. I think that's also in there too. And when you get to the kind of climax of the album with the last two tracks, with Manners Like a Spring Flower especially, where there's this lyric that she repeats, love is not enough. One is not enough. No one is enough. The heart of man is impossible to hold. And that to me is like Kristin's coming to terms with this notion that she cannot, like, she has to at some point realize that making a god out of this person, that clinging to this partner or this source in her life that is unable to be the thing that she needs, or that her relationship with it is something that is unhealthy because of the need she's projecting onto it. It's an acceptance of that in that song. Love is not enough. And then and again, if you want to bring it to those lyrics back to the whole thing of God, like God loving us is not enough if he also, abuses us, or love is not enough if you're in a relationship with someone who is suffering some kind of addiction or some kind of infidelity or some kind of thing that is a betrayal. Love is not enough if they're doing those things. And yeah, the heart of man is impossible to hold. That's such a powerful lyric when you reflect it back on everything that this album has done up to that point, and all of the things that we've talked about. You can't. It's a perpetual cycle of destruction. You can't. That there will always be that imbalance between you and that thing that is outside of you that you are projecting a need or a reliance on. That will always be there. The heart of man will always be impossible to hold. One is not enough. No one is enough. It's when this whole album goes from being this really interesting exploration of these ideas to something with a fucking feasible arc that devastates me every time I listen to it. The progression and the movement towards that realization, which I think is why that song, Man Is Like a Spring Flower, is this huge, colossal track that has some of the most, ambitious instrumentation of the whole album, because it's this real climax and this real realization that's happening. And then the closing track is The Aftermath, which I think you can read in multiple different ways from that realization, because not necessarily making a clear, important realization you need to make doesn't necessarily mean you're on track for a happy ending. It means you've made an important development that you could then use to move towards a happier place, or it means that you could step back from that realization and continue to immerse yourself in despair. And on this closing track, Kristin, in an interview, said, I wanted the emotional trajectory of the record to be a bit of an unraveling. It starts out with strength and confidence and virulence and ends in despair, acceptance, and perhaps a wish for absolution. I kept trying to add all this crazy stuff to this closing track, but we kept taking it out until I was left with a very simple, congruent harmony. It seems like a nice traditional song, but the only curveball is the lyrical ugliness at the end. It really is about the acceptance of loneliness. And so that's the place where the record ends. And you can interpret an emotional tone, any kind of emotional tone to that, but ultimately it's like the acceptance that the reliance on the thing outside of you is poisonous, and so you are ultimately alone. And that is the solitary brethren of Ephrata. That is the closing realization of loneliness. And you can take that and use that as a point of strength, or you can wallow in it and go down the nihilistic path. And Kristin, as a great artist, doesn't tell you where to go, but that is the place that the record ends with. It ends in loneliness. It ends in this more stripped back, simple place. And it's the perfect conclusion to everything that has come before it. And contrasting the glorious exaltation of lyrics like "Paradise will be mine, all my wounds are mended," which she sounds positively funereal when she's singing. You have that opening sample of that woman who's convinced of her immunity through Jesus' blood and entirely unconcerned with the harm she could do in making others sick. That's Kristin, I think, pulling a final bit of sly undercutting. It's not as though she believes devotion to God and salvation through God is this purely delusional thing, but she believes nevertheless that devotion breeds the grounds for suffering, for allowing yourself to be abused, for allowing others to be abused, to believe you deserve to be destroyed, to believe that the ultimate reward of submission is freedom. It is both, as she says, a wish for absolution, a wish to be saved, and also an ultimate cementing of one's own subjugation and state. So, yeah. And my closing statement is that, as Kristin has said, and I kind of brought up, a lot of people see this record as a condemnation of religious subjugation. But obviously, I think it's more complicated than that. It's a record about believing you deserve to be subjugated and punished by God or whomever. And at the core of it, the real thing that has stayed with me the most this week is the fact that this is an album about desiring punishment and oppression, because the alternative to punishment is more terrifying than being punished.
I like how you pointed out one thing, being the sort of the way it starts kind of tighter, more focused, and then kind of more confident, and then kind of unspools from there. And it kind of, I think the album's trajectory is reflected by that too, because I think the second half of this record is a little bit distinctly more meditative, contemplative. It makes me think a little bit more. I'm a little bit more like, this isn't a problem with it, it's just how it feels, is that I'm a little bit more like engaged in that first half of like paying attention to every single little thing, whereas the second half kind of feels like a tide rushing in. It's just kind of, it's both cathartic and deeply uncomfortable, and it never resolves on being just one of those things. And that's why I really like the direction it goes in and the ultimate final note that it goes out on. I find it both satisfying and unsatisfying in a way that feels complete, and it's not even like fully good. It's just, it kind of just leaves me thinking like, fuck, man, I gotta think about some shit, man. Fuck.
Yeah, I really haven't said anything on this, mostly because it's been a difficult week to focus on anything.
Morgan is moving context for viewers.
Yeah, I'm not even close to comprehending this yet. So I will say that I like it. It's obviously very well written and just breathtakingly performed. As for the themes of it and what it means to me, we'll see.
Right.
I think Morgan represents a very, very vital part of the audience with this album, is that it's like,
Yeah.
you know, we're obviously coming at it with all these angles, all these takes, all these opinions, all these interpretations, is that by its very nature, something like this, purely from the outset of its construction, can be alienating. And it's something that you like. The only reason I have the perspective on it that I do is because I have listened to this thing incessantly since it dropped, every single day, trying to parse through it. And if that's not something that you're very interested in doing, this might not be for you. It's not like it's so intellectual and so deep.
Unable to.
Yeah, it's like, it's a thing that exists within its own very narrow existence. And I think in that narrow existence, it is the best possible version of itself.
Yeah.
That in no way represents how people can enjoy it, interact with it, listen to it. It's a strange beast. And if you just kind of are like, sure, okay, I can't blame you. There's no real reason I can explain to you why our interpretations differ. It's really just a matter of like, this is something that you will get as much as you give from it.
Okay. Favorite tracks and ratings for Sinner Get Ready then. Jake, me lead us off.
Not to bring about somewhat of an anticlimax by going first, but I guess we'll start off with a big pop. I will voice one thing that I don't know how to feel about. That being, I'm not entirely 100%, like 80% sure that I like the amount of the spoken word integrations on the album. There's not many. There are just a couple, but I'm not sure how I feel about them kind of coming in and interrupting some of the music happening. That's just, and I don't know how I could feel like I could not like it or like it a month from now. I don't know. It's not big enough of the album, a big enough part of the album to be a fucking like point or to detract from it, but it is something that I feel like I should say as like critically speaking, just because, you know, it'll lend me some credit that I'm not just some fucking fanboy, as much as you can be of a neoclassical dark wave artist. But three favorite tracks are I Who Bend the Tall Grass, Pennsylvania Furnace, and yeah, the Solitary Brethren of Ephrata, even though I really also like Man is a Spring Flower. But yeah, there are nothing below a 9 on this album for me. And yeah, 10. I'm in love with this fucking thing, man. I'm gonna be listening to this for a long time.
All right, my three favorite tracks here: I Who Bent the Tall Grass, Pennsylvania Furnace, and Man is Like a Spring Flower. Least favorite is, I guess, Many Hands. It's just the one track I think I have the least immediate resonance with. But that being said, it's a great album. 8 out of 10.
Amazing. Wow.
I will say my favorites are Pennsylvania Furnace, Man is Like a Spring Flower, and the Solitary Brethren of Ephrata. I don't fucking know what my least favorite is. I need like 10 more years with this fucking thing to even have it down. Right now, I will say a 7.5, but that is by no means final in the slightest.
One thing I will say about the spoken word tracks is they worked a lot better for me after I looked up what she was sampling them from. Because they're all like incredibly interesting scenarios in Christianity. But your mileage may
so they're
vary
like
with
sampled
that.
from something interesting then.
Yeah.
I have not looked into that.
So like,
damn, this
one of them
album
is
just
like,
really don't quit. Fuck.
So one like a televangelist apologizing for cheating on his wife to his congregation.
It was more, it was more specific than that. It was a televangelist apologizing for consorting with a sex worker, and then on a later track, you get an interview sample with that sex worker about that person.
Shit, that's so cool.
Yeah, and I literally have like 3 pages of notes I didn't read because of how long this review was going, and that was all going to be in there. But yeah, we can talk about it another time anyway.
Okay.
But yeah,
the one that works best out of context is the CNN interview, the sample where the lady says, "I can't catch COVID because I'm covered in the blood of Jesus," which it makes me laugh, actually.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's really funny.
Yeah. So my favorite tracks are I Who Bend the Tall Grasses, say Pennsylvania Furnace, and Perpetual Flame of Centralia.
Good shout. I wanted that track to get more love. It's a good fucking song.
Well, I gave it, so there. And I'm giving this album a 9 out of 10. Screw it. Go on.
Okay. If I only had to pick 3, and again, this is one of those things where I have to be that dude who's like, you know, it kind of feels bad. It kind of feels wrong to pick songs because, again, it's this whole tapestry where they're all effective to the extent that they relate to each other.
Which part of Shine On You Crazy Diamond is the best?
But Pennsylvania Furnace is the best song of 2021. I'm just going to say that. So that's one of them. I'll pick Many Hands as well for all of the depth in terms of the things I talked about with that song. And I'll also pick Man is Like a Spring Flower as well. I really don't have a least favorite track on this record, and I didn't know what rating I was going to give this until I reviewed it because I wanted to see kind of how everything fell together, and I'm pretty confident now that I'm going to give this album a 10 out of 10. There we go.
Yes.
Exactly.
Do you guys want to know? Yeah, the average rating.
Probably the best year for music, I think, that I can remember because I've given out now.
Fucking August.
I've given out now, like, yeah, hello, August is back. It's August.
I've given out. Yes, this year in music is really fucking August.
Anyway, what is the average, Saoirse?
I just want to say, I said this like 4 months in where I already had 5 tens, and it's just continued being that amazing. But the average rating is 8.9 out of 10. Thoroughly deserved. Up there with the likes of Roadrunner, New Light, New Machine, Deleuze from the Crematorium, 4 of Hours, Exile and Guyville, Clarity, Around the Fur.
Oh,
Beautiful.
so Jake and Tylercore.
Yeah.
How
I think-
shocking.
We do be given high ratings to albums that are us core because we're wild.
Because we're us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. So if you have extended thoughts on the Lingua Ignota album or anything that we said, hit us up in the comments below. And
Type
now,
a fucking essay. I will read it.
yeah, we will absolutely.
Please.
And now let's move on to our second album that we're going to discuss today. A much shorter discussion, I'm sure it will be, which is quote, "Foxing is a band. Someday, Foxing won't be a band," unquote. This is the Bandcamp bio of Foxing, and it speaks a lot to the story of this band and also kind of hilariously understates the miracle that they're even still a band in the first place. They celebrate their 10th year as a band this year, and they've had some pretty shitty luck over the years. They were reduced to a 3-piece from a 5-piece in the time after their last album was recorded, and this new one was. They've had such shitty luck that they've had to create a Patreon in order to fund the production of this album, which has resulted in, for fans, an incredibly layered and lengthy and extravagant rollout involving casting spells and all sorts of strange stuff in terms of the single rollout of this album. And so they had a number of great singles in their earlier era. I mean, they've always been a kind of band that's been focused on really putting out really, really strong singles. And had they been a band in an earlier era, say in the 2000s, where blogs had more power and the state of music was less of a glut of bands fighting for attention in the pit of the internet, if they'd been around in that era, those songs would have made them big. So in many ways, Foxing are a band that are kind of tragically later than their time. Foxing have been popular enough to just barely sustain themselves, but they've had a hard time of it. In some ways, a person less generous than me could argue that they have been asking for it, with the way that they've consistently refused to stick to a singular sound. They started out as a textbook band in the Midwest emo revival scene of the early 2010s. They released The Albatross, a pretty good album that hews closely to that Midwest emo aesthetic and churned out some really sharp singles like The Medic and Rory that did them well and probably remain their most successful songs to this date, commercially anyway. They then proceeded to essentially disassemble that aesthetic almost entirely, although I think they would still probably consider themselves an emo band at heart and spirit. But they basically disassembled that aesthetic that they carved out musically on that first album with its follow-up record Dealer, which is a quieter but no less devastating album that was much closer to post-rock than emo and was met widely with derision, most infamously from Anthony Fantano, who gave it a 3 out of 10 and confirmed that the Foxing were their whipping boys for what had been perceived as mopey, overly dour emo bands, taking themselves far too seriously by venturing out of their comfort zone. It was brutal. It's a brutal time. Foxing are a band that get a lot of hate on the internet. For what it's worth, I think that Dealer, that second album, is much better and more interesting than The Albatross. Actually, a pretty fucking great album. But for a lot of people, it was tarnished. Foxing were responding to the critical maxim that great bands need to evolve, and audiences were responding with, no, not like that though. This was even truer of their third album, 2018's Nearer My God, which saw a radical overhaul of their sound yet again, but this time into something more maximal and themic, even indebted to progressive influences at certain points. Going from Dealer to Nearer My God is like if The National were to follow up Trouble Will Find Me by making an Everything Everything album. If you were on board with Foxing by this point, Nearer My God cemented that you were all in. It even made them a number of new fans for the obsessive intensity that it developed among its small group of fervent devotees. But of course, despite several punchy singles, it didn't make a fucking dent for Foxing commercially, in the sense that the band were striving for success, and the title track of Nearer My God, one of their most beloved songs, is about exactly that desire, the desire to be successful. They had failed yet again, but of course, for that group of fans, that failure was only another reason to admire the tenacity of Foxing. And here we are, a significant lineup change later, with the newest iteration of the band streamlining their sound into its most anthemic, most heavy, most poppy, and most catchy form yet. Foxing have distinctly crafted something that I think is more theatrical and more cinematic than any music that they've ever made before. What it perhaps lacks in the dynamism of Nearer My God, it makes up for with its sheer, effusive, sustained intensity. There's only one quiet song on this album, and it's a beautiful song, but it's there more out of necessity than anything else because the album kind of needs it. And so it really is this album that kind of blasts into your eardrums. And the playing in general, as you would expect from a band that made a record like Nearer My God, is incredibly ambitious. You have genre bending on this record, perhaps even more genre bending than even Nearer My God. So in many respects, it feels like, though the band are severely limited in terms of their relatively much more limited budget, and so you have this comparative intensity that is a different kind of intensity to the intensity on Nearer My God. It's the intensity of a band that are absolutely throwing every single piece of possible effort and energy and ability that they have as three individual people into an album. And as a result of that, it's a lot to take in, even for a really punchy 10-song, 40-minute record. Have some individual thoughts as well on songs and what the songs are about and all that sort of stuff. But I'd love to hear from you guys about how you approach this record, how you feel about the record, what do you feel its successes, strengths, weaknesses, all of these things are.
It's good. It is. I'd listened to their first album before this. Very different, as Tyler laid out, but I like it very much. Yeah, I like the first track, Blimey, Woof. How do I begin describing the song? That's on this album. It starts off like Sufjan Stevens Light, which I'll take, but it transitions into intense places. And I think what I really love about this record is that you tell someone who's listened to this album that this band used to make emo music, and I think anyone could see that route once you highlight it to them. But this is like, yeah, but my immediate comparison to this album is like The War on Drugs. Often I compare the vocal stylings to The National.
Well, that's the thing, Chvrches, is that, like, yes, they're an emo band at heart, but they're this emo band that's incorporating all of these aesthetics of like indie music, of indie rock specifically.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a thing that really came to the fore on Nearer My God. And that's the thing I think is more present than ever. There's a specific brand of like late 2000s, early 2010s indie rock that this record is kind of, it's, again, when I say that's kind of unstuck in time, it's come after its time in the sense that a lot of what Foxing are doing on this album is not really currently fashionable in any way. No. But if they had made this record 10 years ago, if they'd been around to make this record 10 years ago, it would have been a lot bigger than it is. And so for that reason, it exists in this weird state where people don't really give it the time of day, like they haven't given any Foxing record post the Albatross anyway. But yet there is this compelling thing about it, which is how completely devoted to the music and to throwing themselves into it this band are, such that energy, that passion, that fire, and a lot of it comes as well from the struggles they've had as a band. A lot of the songs that they write, especially on this record, are about the struggle of being in a band that feels like it could be forced to fall apart at any moment because of the fact that people aren't buying into it. And it's not that there are tensions within the band. The band are this beautiful family of people who love themselves very much, but are put in the situation where they this family that means so much to them will get torn apart, like will get broken up. This thing they do, well, they'll not be able to continue doing if they don't, create something or are able to appeal to people and bring people in and bring people on their side. And it's kind of a tragic story in a sense, because what is so beautiful and strong and powerful about them and the music they make seems to be fundamentally at odds with what people care about. And so it's like, this is why you have, I think, foxing devotees who are so like obsessive and so like intense about their devotion, because there's a certain sense to which it is kind of life or death for this band. And that adds a real quality to listening to the album and listening to the songs as well.
Yeah. And I would definitely get on to that point. I think the way you just, in your introduction, the way you describe their struggles against the music industry and the state it's in now of struggling for modicum of attention online, like, as I relate to that so much, and I'm on such a smaller scale than what they do in the music I make. I feel that struggle so intensely, but anyway, like, I think the beautiful thing about those emo roots and the fact they're making that style of luscious indie rock now is it like enables them to push it to much sort of harder, grittier places that I find incredibly exciting. I will say though, like, I like this record quite a bit. I probably wouldn't say I love it, but I was enjoying it a lot. And then the last track, Speak with the Dead, hit. And of course I knew the song because it was a single, I'd heard it before. But in the context of the album, is a track towards the end of the album, it's a closing track, I mean. It just hits on a complete different level. It's just such an intense kind of, I would compare it to some of the songs on, you mentioned everything earlier, some of the songs on Get to Heaven, actually, I would compare it to. It's just at that level of emotional punch and intensity and just that emotional height and emotional complexity as well. It's a very complex song, also being jam-packed with hooks. And to begin on the note it does on that sort of track that begins like real easygoing folk leading into blistering like hard rock. I think someone compared the song to Slipknot, and I wouldn't go that far, but I wouldn't disagree either. To then finish the album on that, it's just an amazing bookend to a really solid record.
Yeah, it feels very much like Foxing have deliberately tried to craft their most sort of well-crafted, contained set of songs. And I think there are certain limitations that this record brushes up against as an unfortunate result of, the limitations of Foxing as a band currently. But I think also, even despite that, the record has a real sort of sense of constantly thrilling joy and emotion to it that almost makes its limitations even kind of a bit endearing in a certain extent, because they're of the sheer passion with which they're throwing themselves into the record regardless. But there are a lot of, it's a very cohesive and well-structured album, and I think that's emblematic. I think that's represented beautifully in this opening track, 737, by the final lyrical passage of the song, which you can't really clearly make out the first time you hear it because it's screamed, but the lines, the planes that never fly, the debt that never dies, the beacons never light, the moon stays in the sky, the lightning never strikes, the homes I've left behind, the floors I'll never find, the eyes that never cry, the love never believed, the dead who never speak. That's every song on the album in a line.
Yep.
And it's this beautiful little introduction that sets the scene. And that's a really subtle detail of the way that they set the scene. But the way that comes in, the way that those vocals are screamed in tandem with the explosive nature of the way the song is shifted, it's really like letting you know where we're at and what the kind of broad ideas emotionally the album's going to be touching on are. And so that's a great, like, really hook that comes in at the beginning of the record that I absolutely love for that reason. And I think I've talked about, I've spent a lot of time discussing this meta commentary or this meta aspect of Foxing as a band and how the band Foxing configures into a lot of what these songs are about, because I think that is the core aspect of this record, is Foxing's sort of, I guess, existential crisis as a band. And I think that's the most interesting aspect of the songwriting, generally speaking. And a lot of the songs can, I think, be read as a continued commentary on their status as a band, and frontman Connor Murphy's relationship with the band as this continual source of despair and frustration in terms of their inability to succeed and the bad luck that they have on the road and with critics and whoever, but also crucially as this family that I've said also, that for all the trials is primarily a thing of joy, of perseverance, and of unified striving. And this is a thing that I think unifies a number of songs on the record, like Go Down Forever, Go Down Together, for instance, which is clearly where this kind of meta aspect can be layered onto it. It's not enough that I'm running on empty. I had to go out and run out while I had you in the car with me. So this idea of the fact that, you know, we're in this situation, we're kind of dragging each other down by pursuing this. You see the Elephant Cell with Alone. Hey, ever since I got going, I've been going for broke. And that's this idea of the situation that they're in. And it's also, you can also see it in a song like the title track on this record as well, which you can read as a kind of love song, I guess, or a song about a relationship, but I think is more fascinating and I think actually more accurate in terms of another meta-reflective song on the relationship between Connor and the band and the nature of how they work as a band and how they move and how they develop their sound and all that sort of thing. I'm never going to stop loving you. I'm never going to stop. This is never going to stop meaning something to me. I'm never going to stop wanting to make this work. If I could, I would have done it by now because of all the shit we've been through. We circle like salmon in holy pools, gathering speed until we can't slow down. This notion of gathering speed being a nice reflection of the way that they've kind of made their sound, ballooned their sound on these last two albums, made it larger and larger than ever to the point where it's like, where do we go from here? How do we go bigger? And very much Draw Down the Moon as an album feels like Foxing answering that question of how do we go bigger than Nearer My God? And that's by not really going bigger than it, by tightening up those huge aspects of it and really ballooning those and tying them into our increased sort of genre experimentation, but also an acknowledgement as well that if you want to run right out, I'll always be a home. This is a great song. I think I love the kind of how to describe the genre flavor of this song. It's like there's this song and Go Down Together have a kind of like not pop punky because they don't sound like pop punk songs, but they have a kind of spirit of
that. The guitars hit in a similar way though, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of the sentiment as well is very akin to I guess a lot of the sentiments of bands like Paramore, for instance, in terms of what's being the lyrical content. Another song that I absolutely love that again you feel like could be a song about a relationship or could be a song about this meta-reflective thing about the band, or I think what it's actually about is about Connor's relationship with his kind of roots in Missouri and the farthest place they've ever been from their home, which is Białystok in Poland, where they played at a festival. And that song Białystok is this very kind of like, you know, punchy indie rock song that has this real sense of booming nature to it, that has that kind of emotional undercurrent in it as well. And Where the Lightning Strikes Twice as well, which I think is maybe one of the most explicit songs of the record in terms of that. Yeah, this is clearly obviously about Connor singing about being in Foxing and the nature of this band. With everything we gave it, it's hard not to feel devastated. But with you, not a day went wasted. So meet me in the tall grass. I twisted both of my ankles on a rain dance. Here up on the hill I want to die on. That sense of we're fucking like, we'll do this as long as it's fucking physically and humanly possible. This is the hill that I want to die on. I want to go where the lightning strikes twice, being this nice little lyric about like wanting to recapture that flash of recognition that they had in their early days from the outside world and being unable to do that. But also, again, the subtext of this continued idea throughout the record is coming to terms with accepting the fact that that may never happen, but that there's plenty to celebrate regardless. And I think that is beautifully touched on in a song like At Least We Found the Floor, which is that aforementioned quieter moment that the record
I love that song so much. And that's another, it has real simple but effective lyrical turns to it.
And it's like it's great because it coming after those previous songs, Draw Down the Moon, Where the Lightning Strikes Twice, and Bialystok, which are all these songs that can be read as these meta-textual commentaries on the band's struggles. It's like this moment where it all comes into crystalline focus and they kind of accept all of this stuff that they've vented through these songs. And it's the beginning of celebrating what they have. And yeah, it could get worse than this, but you know, we found the floor as far as we can see it, as far as we've perceived, as far as we've experienced. So having accepted that, we just go with it. We move from here, and it's a beautiful moment of maturity. And obviously, the extent to which you find all this interesting will depend to an extent on how much you give a shit about Foxing's state as a band, and that I think is why. It's no surprise that this album hasn't resonated with many people at all outside of the Foxing fan base, because it is so heavily about this meta textual thing, and it's like, to a certain extent, Foxing have this situation of, we want more people to care about this band, but also at the same time, we don't want to betray who we are as a band and what we're actually going through. So if we're going to be completely honest, then we're going to write these songs that aren't necessarily going to appeal to a new audience. So it's kind of like, while on the one hand, they want to grow their audience, they want to be able to continue as a band, they have that existential band threat. At the same time, the beautiful thing is that even in spite of that looming, lingering threat of not being able to be a band anymore, they're still just relentlessly devoting themselves to doing what they want to do, to singing about what's on their mind, to manifesting that with these very kind of bombastic arrangements that are genre bending in ways that will definitely not land for everyone. Absolutely. I mean, I've seen a lot of animosity towards Where the Lightning Strikes Twice in particular, which is a song I love, but I can understand why it might not land for everyone, because it's this very strange combination of sounds, and the chorus itself is kind of like doubles back on itself in a way that isn't quite a coherent resolution.
Yeah. And that's probably part of the one thing holding me back to really loving the record, which is that a lot of the time I was reminded of when we did our review of Against Me's New Wave, and we did the bit where we did all of the choruses that's just one line repeated over and over again, and I couldn't get that out of my head, because that's a fair few songs on this record, and I was like, yes, that's a good hook, I would like another one, if that's all right with you.
Sure, fair enough. I mean, I can't take that away from you. I definitely think that to a certain extent, I mean, it's not that I'm easily pleased with this band, but that the fervor that Connor gives, that I have a real connection to him as a performer, that I'll go into, really, and the passion that he puts into these songs, I think really elevates it to the point where the limitation of perhaps some of these choruses not being as full as you might want them to be isn't so much an issue for me. I particularly like, sometimes he'll find a really effective sentiment that really resonates with me, and just, I guess, really lingering in the emotion of that sentiment makes it feel enough. And I think a good example of that for me is the song Cold Blooded, which I really love. And it's just built around like the verses of this song have some, some interesting variation on the notion of, feeling like you're this emotionally paralyzed person, or like emotionally insensitive or unable to connect with the world around you. And the lyrics explore that in various ways, but then it always comes back to the central feeling of this observation that nothing makes me cry, I must be cold-blooded, which is devastating the way that Connor delivers it. Another thing I love about the song as well is that even when you do get the sense that Foxing are brushing up against a certain set of limitations that they have, they'll always go the extra mile to put flourishes in that elevate it above. And for example, in Cold Blooded, the drumming in this song is fucking nuts. Yeah. It's fucking crazy. Their drummer, John Helwig, is doing these fills that are so extra, like compared to the rest of the song and what you would think the song would deserve. And he's just going absolutely apeshit. And my favorite moment on this entire album musically is before the last iteration of the chorus on this song, where he just goes, he's just going absolutely nuts. And the band are just like, and Eric Hudson, the guitarist, is kind of doing a solo on as well. And he's just kind of going nuts. And when I first listened to this album, I went in the car the morning it came out. I listened to it in the car. And I was listening to the song. I was grooving and vibing along to it. And the chorus was happening. And I thought, and then that crazy drum solo thing started happening about 3 minutes in. And I thought, okay, this is the climax of the song. This is the end of the song. And then they did the chorus again on top of that. And it was like, just fucking, it blew my brain wide open. And yeah, it's
something I love about Cold Blooded, because I do love that song so much, is it taps into this thing that's so like current and universal. I think certainly something I've related to. Being like, the world is so shit all the time, you get like desensitized to other people suffering, and you lose empathy because you're just so used to seeing shit things happen. And I feel like that's the real thing the song taps into about like where people are right now.
Absolutely. Like there's that sense of real kind of explosive communication of a frustratingly insular feeling is the thing that Foxing are great at doing. And they do it again in the next song on the record, If I Believed in Love, as well, which is kind of almost the same structurally as the opening track 737, but I kind of like this one a little bit more, just because I like the dynamics and the passion and the, I guess, intensity of the climax, the way it's a bit longer, the way it's a bit more developed. I really love that song, If I Believed in Love, the way it kind of starts out as this almost minimal synth ballad, which is a great sort of flavor for them. I would love to see them do a synth pop record. I reckon they could kill a synth pop album, actually. And then it explodes into this gigantic roaring behemoth where, and again, what works about it is that the passion is there, and the sentiments that Connor is expressing. Every time I run wild from the hint at heaven, oh, now what do you believe in? This sense of Connor is kind of like reckoning with this idea of like, am I afraid of success? Am I afraid of this thing that I've prized after, that I've wanted? It's a really beautiful sentiment, and I love the way that the song kind of explodes. It's a great example of a really strong penultimate track that obviously lays the groundwork for Speak with the Dead, which is, I mean, Saoirse, you've kind of introduced that song beautifully. And I think it's meaningful that this was the first single as well, because it's a song that very much feels of the quarantine without being about it, essentially, because it is a song about communing with the dead. And that itself is like, makes it a sequel song to 5 Cups off of Nearer My God, because they're both about the same thing. And they're both the longest songs on their respective albums, and they both explore this idea of dead friends and communing with them in some kind of moment of transcendence. And then that is the glory and the hugeness of that is conveyed through the music as well, and the size of it all. And yeah, it's a beautiful sentiment as well, that notion of a disconnect from people in your life that have died, or people of your life that are no longer with you, or people in your life that you can no longer reach because of the quarantine, that you are able to commune with in this otherworldly space. In my dreams,
got this wonderful idea where like you commune with these people in your dreams, and when you're awake, you know that these people would rather not be contacted, but yet you still return to them when you're asleep, because that need is inside you. And I think that's just so powerful.
Yeah. In my dreams, I'm on a porch with you, and I promise I've been doing well in your name. I won't try to speak with you again until I watch my last breath dissipate. Gut-wrenching stuff, right? And it's a beautiful note, again, in terms of the existential qualities of the song as well, the sense of lingering on death and the inevitable next stage, if you like. Again, is a nice sort of nicely fits alongside the other, more meta existential aspects of the songs on this record, in terms of the end of the band approaching as well. And so, yeah, it's a great closer. And I have inadvertently kind of just gone all over the map with this album. I didn't really intend to, but I might as well then finish off by talking about my favorite song on this record, which I haven't talked about yet, which is a very meaningful song to me. In order to do that, I need to briefly talk about another song from a different Foxing album. My favorite Foxing song, which is a song called Night Channels. It's off of their album Dealer. It is a song about being in the closet. It's a song about being unable to realize who you really are, obviously, but it's also a song about the pain of having feelings for someone in your life and not being able to express those feelings because of stigma that would be associated with that, because of that would mean you'd have to come out, because that would mean more meaningfully that your relationship with that person as a friend or as in whatever other context you know them would have to end or would become poisoned or whatever. And so it's Night Channels off of Dealer is this beautiful song about the emotional devastation of that state of mind. And then incidentally, it has a great short film music video. It's probably my favorite music video of all time that explores that theme in a lot more detail that I highly recommend. But then, so that theme was there in Night Channels, my favorite Foxing song, as long as I've been a Foxing fan. And then this record has a song on it called Beacons. And the song Beacons is, it is a song about being free. It's a song about being able to realize who you are. It's a song, I mean, it's explicitly a song about being out, right? It's a song about not being in the closet in terms of whatever that is. It's a song about realizing your identity, your sexuality, all of those things. It is a triumphant fucking banger. And when I think about it in context of the only other explicit reference point that I can think of for this closeted concept in Foxing's discography, I'm sure it informs other songs of theirs in a more subtle way. But when I think about it in relation to Night Channels, which is a song that helped me to come to terms with my own closetedness and my own fear of coming out and my own complex emotional feelings about my sexuality and my identity that I was not even really fully cognizant of until this song made me aware of them. And the reason I'm going into all this details because I know we'll never review Dealer, so I have to say this now in the context of this song. But yeah, that song is meaningful to me for all of those reasons. And then Connor, after that album came out, I think much later, Connor eventually came out as bisexual, and that was huge. That helped me to realize who I was, in one of many ways in terms of identity and stuff. And so yeah. Anyway, really long-winded, I know, I'm sorry, but like that whole song about being in that state of devastated covered upness and then having Beacons come in, and it's just a song about fucking triumphant joy of not being in that place anymore. It's a song about the triumphant joy of being who you are, and fuck, I'm gonna start singing I Am What I Am in a fucking minute. Jesus Christ, what am I? I'm a fucking joke. But this song is fucking the banger of the year, man. This song is everything I needed. The rest of this album could have been dog shit, and I wouldn't give a shit if this song existed, and it does, and I like the rest of the album a lot, but this song is the fucking towering achievement. Not only is it that it feels like it's the best realized of these really like propulsive rock songs that they're trying to do on the record, a lot of which I love, but this feels like the best realized one musically, of that kind of like propulsive indie rock single sort of song. But that alone makes it a great track. But then that whole lyrical thing, I was floating there for so long, king of nothing but the space I take up, petrified by the sight of the sun, fire broke loose in a moment there, I let it breathe for the first time as it danced through the room undressing. It held the closet shut, but I was out with the beacons of the shame left behind. For the first time, I felt alive. I thought I couldn't move my feet, but I'm running with you now. We're a stampede. Like, fuck, what do you need? What more do you need than that? That's the most triumphant thing I've heard on a song this entire year. And I was not expecting it in the slightest. I was not expecting at all to get this fucking life-affirming banger that resonates with me in this very personal way. And here it fucking is. And I am made speechless by it. I've listened to this song more than 50 times in the last week. It has just been dominating my brain. I love everything about it. It might have overtaken Night Channels as my favorite Foxing song, possibly. I don't know yet. It's kind of too soon to say, but fuck, it's so good, and it's so like I just think it's a banger. I just think it's a bop. And that's the thing that I come back to with this album. I've done all of this analysis shit that I do where I dig into the lyrics because I want my feelings to be rooted in some kind of substance. But at the end of the day, I put this fucking album on and it bangs, and shit like this song hits the fucking dopamine switch, and I'm running with it now, and we're a stampede, me and Foxing. And that's all that fucking matters. To me, anyway.
The song that I've come back to the most since it was released as a single and since the album came out is Where the Lightning Strikes Twice. And that is probably my favorite song on here. I said when I first heard it that, like, wow, this is what I wish the Killers sounded like now, which is fucking hilarious today.
Brandon Flowers, you're nothing. Wait.
I speaketh too soon. And, you know, I did not like that song as much as I do now because it's weird. And a lot of this album is like that. It's kind of a stealthy, weird grower of an album that, you know, for me, in no way lives up to Nearer My God, but I also didn't expect it to, and it didn't have to. It just needed to be what it is, and it is very good at being what it is, even if I like what it is a little bit less than its predecessor.
I want to clarify as well. I completely agree with that. Like, I've been effusive in my praise because, like, I love this band and I like this record a lot. But I am under no illusions that I think this album is the masterpiece that its predecessor is. But also, like, I don't really care. Like,
yeah, I mean, like, you know, there's maybe like 30 albums as good or better than that one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
It's a fucking.
You give me bangers.
Some real a fever dream after Get to Heaven.
Yeah,
thing.
actually. And honestly, like, I think Morgan earlier this week kind of said it was like 2021's Reanimator, which is like,
yeah.
I think an even more apt comparison, right? Because they're both examples of a band like taking their sound and making it like really loud and intense and heavy and messy and noisy and like really blowing up those extravagant elements to it, and then getting responded to by general audiences with what this is a fucking mess. What the fuck is this? And then the people who like it a lot. And also, like, that sonic similarity is funny because both albums, I believe, were mixed, or at least partly mixed, by John Congleton. So another kind of indie rock dude. Also, this record, also worth noting as well, just because we've reviewed this band on the podcast as well, this record was also co-produced in its entirety by Andy Hull of Manchester Orchestra.
Yeah, he's got writing credits on like every single song here.
Yeah, this is just very fun, joyous experiment this band has given us, and I am quite fond of it. I don't really have detailed thoughts because it just, most of the appeal of this album is just that it fucking makes me want to dance, and I don't even like to dance. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Big bisexual with sword on the front cover. What more could you want?
Big bisexual. I honestly don't really have, like, I'm a little bit like Morgan here. I'm definitely not as hot on it as you guys are, just because with multiple listens, it didn't quite have the staying power that I wanted it to. That the first listen, like, because like the first listen, it was just so like refreshing to hear them be so propulsive and emphatic. Not that they weren't on Near My God, obviously, but it's definitely a distinctly new tone for them. And it's an enjoyable one. I enjoy the record. I think it's quite good. I guess if we're going to have some contentious debate with this, is that I just really, I don't think a song on here is like bad or anything. I don't really get behind When the Lightning Strikes Twice. It's just, I think Saoirse mentioned earlier, it's just like, it's just,
that's one of the songs I had
repeating its chorus.
Yeah, that was one of the big moments where I had the new wave issue with.
Yeah, I was just kind of like, and it's like, it's got this kind of quality to it where it's just kind of like loops back into itself, and then it's just kind of like, are we getting, okay, can we?
Yeah, what's funny
shit.
about that? Jake,
I love how Jake is doing amazing
That's
Apex Twin right
fair.
now.
Jake, don't feel bad about that. Like, it's a common reaction I've seen a lot to this song. It's the lowest rated song on the album on Rate Your Music's track ratings. I played this album to my partner in the car, and their reaction to this song was "Make it stop." And they like Foxing and they like the rest of the record, but that song definitely left a bad impression for that reason.
Yeah,
So it's
If I was in the car, I may have called your partner a faggot in the moment and regretted it later.
No,
That
it's
may
fine.
have been a thing that hypothetically happened in this hypothetical situation that I am describing.
I can't wait to be hypothetically called a faggot by you.
Well,
Morgan.
they
You're
get
a
away
faggot.
with it. They get away with
Thank
it
you.
because they're big on the Near My God train with me. So,
Yeah.
if you're on that
right,
train,
right,
you're
yeah,
allowed to
fine.
have hot takes. But anyway,
And yeah, I totally am on the Near My God train. I think that record's incredible.
that's
And I think it's
Record
incredible.
Clubs, isn't it, for later this year? I'm pretty sure it's still on the
Oh,
list.
good. Well,
No,
that's
I
the-
moved it to January.
Oh, still on the
well,
list.
some
still
reason.
on the horizon.
But
There's a lot to dive into with that one, and
Oh yes.
for me anyway, it's sort of the opposite effect here of just where it's like Near My God got better the more I listened to it, in the sense that I was just like, wow, this is really good at first, and then I was just like, wow, there are songs that I just keep coming back to, and then I just kind of felt it with each listen. Whereas this, a bit of its impact is still a little bit. There are definitely huge highlights here that make this worth listening to if you're a fan of the band. I think I really love the pairing of 737 and Go Down Together. I think that 737 is a great opener, and I really love just the whole, like, that kind of metaphor of the plane that's being painted over and being made heavier and heavier, just to relay the idea of feeling like a burden to someone, but like flying anyway and like going along with them. And Go Down Together right immediately after that is like the support that a friend can show you afterwards. And it's like, it's just a really seamless thematic 1-2 punch that I really appreciate. And I think both songs are just great in their own right. And I really love
that transition between those two songs as well. Like, it's just seamless the way that 737 goes into Go Down Together. It was like, boom.
Definitely think that's not like, just a cool little thing they did, just because the songs feel of it piece. And like Tyler, big fan of Beacons. Second favorite song on here. Beacons is a great fucking song. This is the song that like I will think about when I think about this album. And I think the title track's good too. And yeah, I'm not really big on Where the Lightning Strikes Twice. And Yellowstock is also just kind of a song that I feel basically the same about. It's a little bit better, like, lyrically, and it's not as repetitive, but it just comparatively a bit of a weaker track for me. But at least We Found the Floor, I think also.
That's my second favorite.
I love that.
Sorry. I mean, look, this is a fucking Jimmy World Clarity thing. I'm sorry. I just don't. It just doesn't do much for me. But afterwards, I have to echo Chvrches' enthusiasm for At Least We Found the Floor. I really think that kind of low in energy sort of works for the album a lot. And Cold-Blooded and If I Believed in Love are good songs, even though I don't think they quite hit the highlights that the first kind of string of songs do. Though I will say it ends on a very strong note. Speak to the Dead is just a great fucking closer. That's probably my favorite song here. And yeah, it doesn't really have the staying power with me, but even as it sits right now, I still would say that it's an album I have a lot of affinity for and that like is worth listening to. But like, if Foxing isn't already your bag to begin with, this is so not going to convert you. But I think Tyler's enthusiasm and thoughts on this record are sort of emblematic of just like, it sounds dismissive to say it's like it's for the fans, but it's like,
No, it is.
if you're into the narrative of the record and you're into the narrative of Foxing, I feel like this is going to be interesting and refreshing. But it's just like, in a larger context of music, who knows? I don't know. Fucking who cares? But like, it's a very good, very fun, upbeat record. I have a good time with it.
Yeah, and I think also just to like add briefly to what you were saying about like the limit of its appeal as well. I think it's definitely like for newcomers, it'll definitely be limited by to the extent that obviously the production doesn't have the finesse or the depth of Near My God by
agreed.
limitation, right? That's not even a choice because they had to self-produce and they had Andy Hull's help, but they had to self-produce this record because they had like a fucking fraction of the budget they had on the last one. And so and I think that limitation, I can't, pretend to be like, well, that limitation doesn't that is not a limitation or whatever. Like that is a limitation, but it's certainly something that I think I'm personally able to overcome because of the affinity I have for the band and these songs. And that's a bit of bias that I have that I'll freely admit offhand. But it is definitely a thing that, is certainly a limitation of the album.
Yeah.
I will say though, the guitar tones on this album are universally top quality.
They're banger. I mean, just the tonality of the soloing as well. I love on this record, like Eric Hudson's soloing is not like terribly complex, but it's always very like impactful when it happens throughout these songs. Like I already mentioned, the guitar soloing in conjunction with that fucking fever drumming on Cold Blooded is great. Great soloing throughout the record. The soloing, particularly in Speak with the Dead, is just kind of
incredible,
interstellar levels of good.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think and that's an example of like this record has these kinds of flourishes that I think really help it and speak to the ways in which Foxing as a band try to, I guess, stand out in their own way.
Yeah, but especially with the self-produced record, the way that not even with the soloing is great and it really makes the closer. But just the choosing of like the settings of the distortion pedals and the amps and processors, and then the mixing, it's all immaculate.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it definitely helps that this is the fourth record they've made, so they've been around the block a few times, but so they've adjusted to that change as well as I guess you could hope. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm the only one left to speak on this album.
Yeah.
In fairness, there are things I like about it. I think the opener 737 is pretty good. I like that track a fair bit. I think it's a nice emotional opener. I loved that little detail they added lyrically, which you mentioned earlier, Tyler, about running through all the premises of the tracks. That was a cute little thing. And if anything, I feel I liked this album most in its quieter, more reserved moments, like the closer, Speak with the Dead. I thought the ambition and emotion of the project was rather well conveyed. And I also did care quite a bit for the track, At Least We Found the Floor, another one of those subtler, gentler songs on the track list. But I won't bury the lead. Well, first I will a bit more because I did enjoy some of the mild 8-bit opening influences. Those were cute enough, but yeah, generally I really did not care for most of the material on here. Mostly tracks like Where the Lightning Strikes Twice and Bialystok. I couldn't help but listen to this album and have the image of like a beer or a car commercial evoked with the songs on here.
Go fuck your mother.
You first.
It's okay, August. I ride in solidarity with you with the two songs. Woo.
I mean, I'm coming at this from the perspective where I haven't heard anything else this band has done. And I have no doubt they've made better records than this one, ones I may enjoy more. Maybe, I don't know. And it isn't even really, for me, the aspect of this being so deeply like a personal narrative to the band lyrically, which, I mean, I can get along with a lot of these songs topically. I think they're fairly general enough that that's not the one specific interpretation you have to draw away from them. But at the same time, that is also to its detriment, where I found them a little hollow at the end of the day in terms of registering as an emotionally impactful song. I just found the confluence of the heavier influences on this album not really equating to a sound I particularly cared for a ton.
I mean, to me, that's the least surprising thing in the world, August. So don't worry. I knew this would very much be a not for August band, and that's fine. I do think whenever we do eventually get to Near My God, I think you'll like that record more just because of a lot of the things you've spoken to in terms of the issues you have are not things that I could see taking away from that album. But yeah, look, it's one of those things. I appreciate you trying it out and giving it the time of day anyway.
Just another classic case of idiosyncratic band is not a universal hit with the Jams and Tea podcast.
Yeah, so true, Queen.
That beer commercial thing, that was some wonderfully placed bait.
Oh man. Okay, favorite tracks
I
and
think the
ratings.
bait was placed for the wrong person, because if it was bait, it was placed for Tyler, but he lured in and caught Morgan instead.
Look, I am smart enough now not to buy into August's bait. Not to suggest that Morgan isn't, but Morgan gives less of a fuck about it. Whereas Morgan gives less of a fuck about what anyone thinks, whereas I now don't want to buy into August's bait.
Unlike my idiot co-host.
Unlike this fucking moron sitting across from me.
What?
Jordy LaForge has entered the chat.
Oh man.
He's not entering Jeopardy.
Oh.
Hell.
Ooh. Got him.
Favorite tracks and ratings.
Yeah.
Let's do it. We'll
Yeah.
do as we do, switch it up other way around. I'll go first. My favorite tracks are Beacons. Also Speak with the Dead. Absolutely can't be a hot take on that. And I know that it's probably not going to turn up in maybe anyone else's top three. So I'll throw Cold Blooded in there as well. Least favorite track. Probably Go Down Together. I really like that song, but if I had to pick a least favorite, it would probably be that one. And I'm going to give this album an 8.5.
Amazing. Go Down Together, a great Decemberist track. Sorry.
Yo, I've been thinking that this whole week. So thank you for being on my wavelength there. Every time I see the words "go down together," I get that "we both go down together" from Picaresque in my head. So thank you for that.
I have
You're
never
welcome.
once had a thought about the Decemberists.
You should
Not
listen to
one time.
Picaresque. It is great.
No,
and I
we-
think
we
you'd
don't.
like it.
No
I
doubt.
don't even know who they are.
I've got on my list of eventual albums to Record Club, The Crane Wife, because I think that'll go.
yeah.
I think that'll go over well because it's like this folk band suddenly makes a prog album and it's killer. Anyway.
Yeah.
You had
But,
my
Morgan-
curiosity, and now you have my attention.
Look. You should. My favorite December song is an 8-minute sea shanty called
Oh.
Mariner's Revenge Song,
That's
and you have to listen to it.
great. Yeah.
Well, sea shanties don't always go over well with me, as we have discovered by way of weed.
Oh,
No, it's a much more Morgan core sea shanty. But anyway, that's a big
Yeah.
digression. Saoirse, your favorite.
What a phrase!
I was literally about to say, I did not expect to hear that's a very Morgan Corsi shanty when I woke up this morning.
Not when I woke up today, but I was about to go to bed yesterday, and then the Killers released their best album. So fucking,
So in this spirit, listen to the song, I guess. My favorite tracks are 737, Speak with the Dead, and Cold Blooded. My least favorite track, If I Believed in Love, I guess. They're all pretty good. And I'm gonna give the record a 7.5.
My three favorites are When the Lightning Strikes Twice and Bialystok. And I'm gonna say for my number three, probably Speak with the Dead. And my least favorite, I will probably say Cold Blooded, but that song is quite solid. It's just of them all, that is the one I will go with. And I will also give it an 8.5.
My three favorites are
August
What-
looking at our standard deviation saying, I'm about to fuck up this man's whole career.
yeah. The 737, Speak with the Dead, and I'm not gonna say that. At least we found the floor. Least favorite is Where the Lightning Strikes Twice, and I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10.
Damn, no Chinese
Oof.
satellite. Damn.
There
okay.
were enough songs I enjoyed, but
Okay.
more I did not.
Fair enough.
The
obviously.
Sound Deviation is currently rivaling Charlie XCX. So Jake,
Oh,
help
damn.
us.
Well, I can't imagine I'm going to really help or hurt it all that much, but my three favorite tracks are 757, Speak with the Dead, and Beacons. Least favorite track, Where the Lightning Strikes Twice, and I'm going to give the album a 7.
Amazing. Right. So you did help. A standard
Oh.
deviation of 1.85, which is much
You're
better.
welcome.
And an average of
7.1,
we broke,
which is equivalent. Sorry?
we broke 7, so I can't complain.
Peaceful as Hell. Paul Bearer, Forgotten Days, As the Eternal Cowboy.
Well, those first two are album reviews that are notorious for having one person like fucking so in the bag that so that makes sense. All right, well, that concludes this week's this week's main episode of the Jams and Tea podcast. Let us know in the comments below what you think of either of the albums we discussed today: Lingua Ignota's Sinner Get Ready or Foxing's Draw Down the Moon. We'd love to hear from you, as I said at the top of the episode. If you have any kind of reviews or anything you want to leave below as well, we'll be happy to shout those out in subsequent episodes. And yeah, August.
As always,
Man's
everyone.
finding a beer slogan to lead this out with.
no,
I literally tried to look up the slogan for my bottle of vodka, but it's in Russian and I can't read it.
Well, that tracks.
Fuck that foreign shit. Pabst Blue Ribbon.
We can go with that. Yeah.
It's very Lynchian.
Anyway,
Where can I hang myself?
Pat's Blue Ribbon. Fuck that foreign shit.
No, you have to get the line right if you're going to actually use it.
Yeah.
It's Rock Over London, Rock On Chicago, Pubs Blue Ribbon. Fuck that shit. No, Heineken. Fuck
You
that shit.
fucking moron!
No, you completely beef that
Yeah.
in spectacular fashion.
If you're gonna say the line, you gotta get it right. To rock over England.
Rock Over London, Rock On
Least favorite
Chicago,
track.
Pabst Blue Ribbon. What'll you have?
So, okay, Foxing. I get it. You're all staring at me. I have feelings.
Stop posting about foxing.
You know
I'm
what?
tired of hearing about it. Everywhere I see it. On Twitter, it's fucking memes. On my podcast, it's fucking memes.
August becoming a meme while describing memes. Yes.
Good meme. Also, I have restrained myself pretty heavily in terms of not talking about this album.
That's restraint. Jesus Christ.
But look. Let me get started.
Yes.
Sure.
Quote: Foxing is a band. Someday, Foxing. Thank you, Jake. Threw me off there. I was in the middle of something there. Damn.
Foxing the band.
Foxing the man.
Cousin of Portugal.
Yeah.
The same joke. I made it again.
Yeah.
So funny.
Get it all out of your system.